Okay. Well, by my computer, it is 5:45, so I will call to order the January 6, 2022 regular City of Hendersonville Council meeting. We begin our meetings with a silent invocation for people to pray or meditate as they choose, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you will rise, please. You'll join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We start with public comment time. We have 2 people signed up to speak in person. If anyone who is listening digitally would like to speak, please raise your hand so we can know how many people wish to speak.
Madam Mayor, Lynn Williams has raised her hand, and that's the only one I see right now.
Okay, thank you. We will get to the online comments after the in-person comments. When you speak, if you would give your name and your address for the clerk's record, please. And the clerk is joining us digitally as well, as is the city attorney this evening. Okay, first, Brenda Raymer.
Thank you. Happy New Year, all. Welcome, Ms. Roundtree. I'm Brenda Raymer. I have the Aquarium and Shark Lab by Team Echo on Main Street. If you've not been there, please do come see us soon. I just wanted to give you a little update about how we ended last year, what we're looking forward to in 2022, and you'll get a full report in February when we do it with our board itself. But when we ended up the year, we are closed right now until mid-February because we're overhauling a lot of our systems and we are expanding our reptile area. If you don't mind, I'm going to pop this because it moves when you talk. Crazy things, aren't they? We looked at just under 10,000 people last year through our doors as visitors. Over 4,500 people in classes and programs. We have expanded our educational outreach that far, and we have done a lot digitally. A lot of that, about a third of that, was done digitally, and a lot, probably, I didn't write the number down, but I remember going it in my head, and 50% of that was done to the schools here, where we could do outreach into schools and homeschool groups within Henderson County and Hendersonville City. So I thought that was pretty neat. In total, we did 346 education programs and presentations, which is quite a lot to happen a year after shutdown. We were also listed in the top 150 aquariums in the U.S. We are working with a company called Brownie Marine, the founder of which is Robert Carmichael, who was born and raised here in Henderson County, moved to Pompano Beach, Florida, and he now designs underwater submarines. And we are going to be part of his research program. How cool is that for our kids to get into? We did a coral project with Duke University last year, where we worked with 3 of their graduate students remotely on raising coral right in our own aquarium with them. And we were adopted by a international agency called Chasing Coral to be able to teach their coral propagation curriculum. So those were really big, exciting things. And then coming up in 2022, we are actually getting picked up by UNC Chapel Hill, their environmental education program. We will be a pilot site for their environmental education program for the state of North Carolina. We are also being picked up by Oceana, which is another international ocean exploration agency, and we have been accepted to teach their KELP, their kids' environmental learning program, their curriculum as well. So our teachers now here have the ability to reach out and use 2 international fields of study just through us. I want to save the biggest one for last. I just finished my Ocean Climate Specialist post-baccalaureate degree through Cal U and the American Meteorological Society, so I've already been working with the county school system to work with their teachers to advance their weather and climate education programs. We have been invited to attend 2 programs this summer, one down at the Bimini Shark Lab, where my children, my students, anybody under 40 is a child in my world, where our students will go down there and they will work with their shark research team and actually tag, measure, and collect data on lemon sharks out in the ocean. And we've also been asked to join a new research vessel that will be housed in the Bahamas, and we will be able to tag sharks and trace them right here from Hendersonville with the link, with the buoy link, and we'll be able to track them from right here and go down there and work. And it's being run by Dr. Austin Gallagher, who's out of Texas, and then David Harris, who designed the research vessel. And these gentlemen both work with Nat Geo, and they came and asked us. So it's like, this is so cool, we have to make all this happen now. And then I think probably the last big thing that I want to tell you about our intern program is doing great. I have an intern surprise right here from Hendersonville High School. 2 other aquariums have reached out to us about using our intern program as a model guide for ones that they want to set up. And that's pretty impressive to me. I'm like, wow, sure, I guess we can do that. Why not? We'll share whatever we know. We have a new assistant director. She came to us last summer as an intern from Elmira College with a degree in biology and chemistry and a heavy minor in physics, so over my pay grade. But she came to us from Elmira College, and then we were able to keep her on as an assistant director since we lost ours to the Henderson County Public School System. So we teach teachers and then they leave us, you know? But that's what we're supposed to. And I think that the last thing that I really want to tell you, the big surprise of all, is we will be published. Hopefully it will be this year. We have been approached from the American Elasmobranch Society, which studies sharks and rays, and the Field Museum out of Chicago. They are taking all of our shark study data over the last 10 years, and so the students from here will have their name in a publication that's coming out by the Field Museum, which I think is pretty phenomenal to do. So, and that's really about it. Okay? Any questions or anything I can answer for you?
Pretty cool.
Well, thank you so much for always being such great fans and supporters of the aquarium. We are very proud to be part of this community, and we hope we represent you well.
Thank you. All right, exciting information. Indiana Jackson.
Hello, everybody. It feels so good to be back. Oh my God, I ain't seen y'all in so long. Okay, so anyways, I'm sorry. Indiana Jackson, 11 Mountain Road, Hendersonville, North Carolina, 28792 or 91. All right, so I'm gonna take this mask off. I wrote on there that I'm here to talk about Black history, right? Before I speak on that, is one thing that I did want to add. There's a tree board, I understand, right? And I understand that there's concern about all of the new developments for the housing that's coming up, being developed around Henderson County or Hendersonville. I'm not sure if that has to do with you or the county. I get confused sometimes. But, and I just want to reach out and to, because I'm like a big advocate on housing, and to reach out and explain that if there's some way that we could work together, because I absolutely agree that too many trees are being cut down here in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and if there's some type of way that we can buy up already used buildings, or unused buildings or unused homes, and fix them up somehow, and maybe just kind of work together on stop cutting down so much trees and creating housing with Housing Authority, or however that works. Anyways, Black history. So 1847, I hear we are here to celebrate 175 years, and with that, I just want to say, don't forget us. For those first 18 years, we were, not we, my ancestors, Black people were still enslaved here in Hendersonville. Taxes were paid on Black people, and so we contributed. Just asking that you don't just to remember that these people have a voice. They had no voice before. And I think that's all I have to say. That's it. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you. Okay. If you could call on the people online in order.
Lynn Williams, you've been unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Lynn Williams, Chadwick Avenue. Today, my comment refers to two different issues. One is there is an active wildlife crossing at the street light in front of our house on Chadwick Avenue, and I've been trying to sort out how to possibly get some wildlife crossing signs there. Councilmember Miller suggested reaching out to Public Works and getting the signs priced. And I was advised by Mr. Wooten and Ms. Reese that the process of getting these wildlife signs is to bring the awareness and request to the council. And so that's what I'm doing today, is to please bring awareness for the need of a wildlife crossing sign on Chadwick Avenue. We see a lot of animals getting hit every week, and there's a corridor there to the floodplain, and that would be really a wonderful thing. And if you need help with funding, I'd be willing to work with civic groups to get the funding for these DOT regulated signs. So that's the first part, thank you. And the second part is about Boyd Park. It's an update on Boyd Park. So I attended the HPC meeting in December with Larry Phillips, and we were able to speak on public comment. What we got from the meeting was the HPC is drafting a letter to send to the council, and they are going to approve that letter in the next meeting. And there was concern that maybe the message would not get to the council in time. So I had volunteered to speak at public comment today to let the council know that the HPC was drafting a letter for consideration of inclusion for the planning process at Boyd Park in the efforts of historic preservation, however that looks. Secondly, to this point, let's see, the State Preservation Office recommends getting in touch with them to ensure compliance with Section 106 of the Historic Preservation Act. I have been advised to inform this council of the due diligence needed to ensure compliance. If you do destroy a historic landmark or property eligible for historic landmark designation, you could risk losing federal funds for the fire station projects. And they have suggested to please be in touch about that review. That's 106, Section 106. And those are my 2 points for today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Anyone else requested?
No, ma'am.
All right, well, we will close our public comment section then. Consideration of the agenda. Is there anything anyone would like to have added to or removed from the agenda? Or if not, a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Madam Mayor, I motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of the agenda as presented say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it. We have our agenda. Consent agenda. Is there anything anyone would like to have moved from the consent agenda to the regular agenda so it can be discussed? Or if not, a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda.
Madam Mayor, I move the City Council approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of approving the items on the consent agenda say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it, and we have that done. Took care of a lot of business in that one motion. Now we have a couple of presentations that I will be giving, and then some that will come from staff. So the first one is a proclamation in recognition of the 175th anniversary of the city of Hendersonville. We don't have anyone to receive it, but I will read it. Whereas, in 1841, Judge Mitchell King of Charleston, South Carolina, generously donated 56 acres from his summer estate for a site to build the county seat within the county of Henderson, which was formed in 1838 from the southern part of Buncombe County. And whereas on January 7th, 1847, the North Carolina General Assembly approved an act to establish the town of Hendersonville to serve as the seat of government for Henderson County, and named in honor of Judge Leonard Henderson, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of North Carolina. And whereas with the arrival of the railroad in 1879 from Spartanburg, South Carolina, the agricultural significance of the city increased. And whereas in 1913, the town of Hendersonville became known as the City of Hendersonville. And whereas Hendersonville's Main Street, a remarkable 100 feet in width, was designed by surveyor James Dreyer Justice on what was known in the 1850s to 1880s as the Buncombe Turnpike. Main Street today retains much of the character it possessed since the height of its development in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and was registered in the National Register of Historic Places in March 1988. And whereas Hendersonville is traditionally known as the City of Four Seasons, with its distinct seasonal weather patterns which draw visitors to the area. And whereas the City of Hendersonville's governing body and staff are committed to providing quality, efficient services to residents, visitors, and businesses, and promoting a high quality of life. And whereas the 175th anniversary is an appropriate time to reflect on the remarkable history of the City of Hendersonville. Now, therefore, I, Barbara G. Volk, Mayor of the City of Hendersonville, do hereby proclaim January 7th, 2022 in recognition of the 175th anniversary of the City of Hendersonville, North Carolina, and commend its observance to all citizens. So we are celebrating all year with at least one event a month to celebrate and recognize our 175th anniversary. So we all go out. Just going to have to go back out in front. Yep. And I have we have our poster to recognize the 175th, and that'll be available as postcards as well as posters, and you'll hear more about that later. Okay. So right now, I have a certificate to present. If Mr. Larry Rogers would.
Awesome, you want me to come up here?
I would appreciate it. This is a certificate of appreciation on the occasion of his retirement to Larry Rogers for distinguishing himself through dutifully attending most area governmental meetings and advocating and promoting the interests of local business owners in Henderson County over the last 21 years as chairman of the Partnership for Economic Progress. I, Barbara Volk, Mayor of the City of Hendersonville, and City Council members wish to recognize the many years of service to our community by Larry Rogers on the occasion of his retirement, and thank him for his dedicated service to our area business district.
I'm going to say a couple of words. I think Barbara and I are the two oldest. Anybody else from staff been here longer than we have? When I got here, Barbara was on city council with two other ladies. And during her tenure, we witnessed the longest meeting other than a budget meeting that the city or the county had. We came in about 5:30 and we walked out in freezing rain at midnight. It was the debate about the high rise that we're going to build over here. Sunflower was the name of the building. And what happened during the meeting was that we had two prominent folks thrown out of the meeting. The mayor was Mr. Newman at the time, and he threw the attorney for the city out, talking too long, and he threw out Eva Ritchie, speaking too long. So it was I think that the developers of that project probably are thankful, because right after that we had a depression. So they may not have finished it. I've been through several staff groupings in the city and the county. And John, you're a good guy. Good guy. What we tried to portray was, if you're going to have a strong government, you've got to have businesses that will support it. And you can't overtax them or overdo them. You just can't do that. Because if the businesses are not here and the stores are closed, then you have nothing. And all you have to do is go east in this state, and you can find some of the cities that didn't make it. And the state is running a lot of the water systems and the sewer systems because they can't afford it. Thanks for being so nice. I appreciate all of you, and staff's had a great staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will miss seeing you. We never knew a meeting was ready to start until we were sure you were here. All right. Next, we have the fiscal year 2021 Auditor Presentation. Who is going to
I'll ask
introduce
Ms.
that?
Crystal Powell, our
Okay.
Assistant Finance Director, to introduce our auditors.
Good evening, City Council and Madam Mayor. I would like to introduce Tim Lyons, who is here from Malden and Jenkins to present our annual audit from fiscal year 2021.
Thank you all for having me tonight. The way you said auditor, it seemed a little bit like doom and gloom, so I'll try to keep this short. But appreciate y'all having me here tonight. A quick agenda. I've got a few slides here, but just want to introduce myself. This is our first year working with the city, so I want to take a minute just to introduce myself, introduce the firm to y'all. We'll go over the results of the audit. We've got a few slides on some financial ratios and some trends that I think are important just to bring to the attention of the governing board, and then a few comments, recommendations. I've got questions at the end, but certainly as I'm going through it, if there's anything, feel free to stop me and let me know. Just to introduce myself, my name is Tim Lyons. I served as the engagement partner during the conduct of the city's audit. Every one of our audits, at Malden and Jenkins, governmental accounting, financial reporting, auditing is a huge part of what we do as a firm. It's about a third of our firm. There's about 50 of us that spend all year working with governments throughout the Southeast, and so we take it very seriously. And so as a result, every one of our audits goes through our quality control review. So we send it to another partner who's had nothing to do with the audit. They make sure that myself and the other members of the engagement team have dotted every I and crossed every T before we issue a final report. And that was a guy by the name of Trey Scott down in one of our other offices. And then Chad Jackson, who works with me in Columbia, served as the engagement senior associate throughout the conduct of the city's audit this year. The results of the audit, I always joke I should put this at the end, because if I can hang on and tell y'all whether you got an unmodified opinion or not, I can get people's attention the whole time. But the results of the audit, first, I think it's always important to remind everybody of what our responsibility is and what management's responsibility is. The financial statements are the responsibility of the city's management. We, as the independent auditors, are engaged to audit them and express an opinion on them. The city's financial statements do include the operations of a component unit, the ABC board, which we don't audit, so we rely on the report of another auditor for the inclusion of those amounts. And so we conducted our audit both in accordance with government auditing standards and with generally accepted auditing standards, and issued what is known as an unmodified opinion on the city's financial statements, or a clean opinion. There is no higher opinion than that you can get. And so what does that mean? It means that the city's financial statements are considered to present fairly in all material respect the results, the city's net position, the city's results of its operations and cash flows for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2021. So the next few slides are what are kind of known in our world as required communications, things that we are required to communicate to the board in writing. We've turned in a copy of this presentation, so the city has this. I'm not going to go through and read every one of these, but I do think some of these required communications are more important than others, and so we'll touch on those just briefly. I think it is important to know as a board, when you look at the city's financial statements, that you know that there's estimates that go into the preparation of a set of financial statements. As a part of our audit, we review those estimates just to make sure that they're reasonable, that there's a basis for the estimates, that they're consistent with what we see with other governmental entities throughout the state of North Carolina and throughout the Southeast. And I think it's important to know that there are no estimates or other positions that management took that are aggressive. There's no estimates for where there's maybe no basis in making that estimate, or it's a non-standard transaction, or we've chosen maybe a non-standard treatment for an accounting item. So all of those things are very standard in what we typically see in a set of governmental financial statements. Our relationship with management, I think it's important to know that we received full cooperation from the city's management. I wish John was here so I could thank him again for his work tonight, but I'll thank Crystal and the entire finance team for the work that they did. We were talking before the meeting how it felt like last year everyone was sort of prepared for remote audits because it was 2020 and everything was still very new and adjusting and adapting to COVID. And then I think everybody was hoping we'd be back to normal this year, and then it kind of got thrust back into a weird remote environment. So we just appreciate the city's flexibility working with us and getting the audit done and getting it done as quickly and as efficiently as we could. So full cooperation from management. We had one past audit adjustment this year, and what that means is throughout the conduct of the audit, we identified one adjustment that we thought, this probably, this is a difference in what we're thinking this number should be and what the city has. But we got to the end of the audit, we didn't have any other differences in those areas, and kind of decided, this is immaterial, we're okay with this, and so we've passed on it. So that is an item that was not reflected in the financial statements, but it is not considered material. So of course, if it was material, we would have posted it and it'd be in there. But we passed on it. We've talked about it with the city, with management, and we think that we'll get that item adjusted and changed going forward. Last but not least, I think Auditor Independence, just to reiterate, we have to be independent in order to express an opinion on the city's financial statements, and so we meet all those necessary independence requirements, both in accordance with our professional standards, but also in accordance with government auditing standards, because they're a bit more stringent than just our normal AICPA professional standards. In addition to the audit of the financial statements, obviously we also conduct an audit, we're required to conduct an audit on the city's federal and state awards, kind of known as the single audit in our technical parlance, but we are required to test both expenditures of federal awards and expenditures of state awards. And so for this year, the city had about $11 million in federal funding and about $3.1 million in state funding that they spent during the fiscal year on different projects. We tested two major programs. We go through a risk-based process where we have to walk through and determine which programs we're going to audit. That was the Community Facility Loan Program, the USDA loan that is funding the new police station, and then the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, the revolving loan programs for the various water sewer projects that the city has in progress. So we were required to audit those two programs. We have to get the federal and state rules and go through some testing of controls and compliance. And our single audit reports had no issues in them, no findings, no instances of non-compliance, no issues with internal controls over compliance. So all that positive stuff. Just a couple of slides on some financial stuff. I know you all get these updates, but just kind of snippets and taking a high-level view over the last 5 years. The city's general fund, obviously the most important, kind of the operational fund of the city. I think what I take away from this is you can see that revenues and expenditures or total outflows and inflows, tend to be pretty comparable every year. So we're not seeing wild swings one way or the other. And fund balance for the general funds has grown consistently over the last couple of years. You can see it kind of that green line consistently going up. So stable financial performance in the city's general fund. This year, the North Carolina LGC is requiring us to point out what are known as some performance indicators of concern, as they've called them. And this year, the general fund's fund balance available for appropriation has dropped down to about 20%. Now, fund balance grew this year. And so how did fund balance grow but available for appropriation go down? Essentially what went on during 21 is the city's general fund lent cash to other funds to kind of front load some project expenses. That's going to be repaid to the general fund, so there's a big balance there sitting at year end in what is known as a due from other funds. It's a receivable, so it's mainly just a timing difference between when the cash outflows were made from the general fund and when the general fund will be reimbursed. So this is one of those things that the LGC has required us to point out and communicate to the board when we talk about the audit. Nothing, it's not a instance where expenditures vastly outstripped revenues or, were wildly over budget in a bunch of areas, nothing like that. It's just merely a timing difference when it comes to project funding. I think this is an interesting slide always to look at to see where assessed values have done and what tax rates are doing. As you can see, the last 3 years, tax rates have stayed about the same, and the assessed value has continued to go up. And I think you see, what you see in the city's general fund is a stable, relatively stable tax revenue stream, and you've seen it grow over the last couple of years with growing assessed values as opposed to increasing tax rates. So I always think this is an interesting slide to look at. Just kind of for a historical perspective. The general fund's budget for the year, the biggest takeaway for the general fund's budget is that we were showing the final amended budget reflected that we were thinking we were going to use about $1.4 million of fund balance. That was what was appropriated in the city's budget to use to offset expenditures. And so there was a budgeted consumption of fund balance, whereas the city added about $1.1 million to fund balance at the end of the year. So again, I think when you take this in the context with that 20%, only 20% available for spending, it feels like it's a little bit of a conflict there. And the two of those things don't seem to make sense a little bit, but it's just an accounting thing and it's a timing thing. So general fund budget, budgetary performance is there and looks really good. And then lastly, the city does have some restrictive covenants with its related to its outstanding water and sewer bonds. This is disclosed in the city's financial statements as it is required to be. But I think it's important for the governing board to know that the city met both of its covenants. The city the first covenant is that revenues plus 20% of this surplus fund that is set aside in the water and sewer fund has to be equal to 100% of current expenses, 120% of annual principal and interest payments on the revenue bonds, and 100% of the principal and interest payments on the other debt that's outstanding. And that first one, you can see that revenues plus 20% of the surplus fund was about $2.2 million more than what was needed. So that's a positive covenant there. And then the revenues, then we're looking just at revenues. We're not adding in that 20% of the surplus fund. So even that was just sufficient to meet ongoing debt service payments. This is a question that the LGC specifically asks when we submit the audit to the state. Were there any issues with bond covenants? Were there any issues with debt service payments having to be restructured or delayed? And so that's a good thing to know that none of that had to happen and the debt covenants were met. We did have what is known as a finding this year in the audit report. So we had to restate a beginning balance in the city's governmental activities and the city's water and sewer fund. Whenever we have to correct a beginning balance because of an error, it is by definition a material weakness in internal controls. That is just a government auditing standards definition. They don't really give us any wiggle room to to change that at all, because at the end of the day, management was who brought this to our attention during the audit. This was not something that we discovered or uncovered. Management brought it to us, and we realized that we just had a material error in the prior year financial statements that we had to correct. So hearing material error, obviously that invokes maybe, okay, this is a bad thing. Really, it related to depreciation expense, which is a non-cash item. So, from a reporting standpoint, it's really not that big of a deal. It really is just the result of two assets that had been entered in the city system, had been put in with some salvage values, and so it caused depreciation expense to be calculated incorrectly in the prior year. So management identified it. Unfortunately, the numbers were material. We couldn't run those corrections through the current year financial statements that would have distorted the current year numbers, and so we had to adjust beginning net position in the governmental activities in the water and sewer fund. So we had to report that as a finding because we're correcting an error in the previously issued report. So we've talked to the city, we've talked to management. Don't expect this to be an issue going forward in future audits. And then these two management recommendations, these are really just some accounting things that we talked to management about. The first has to do with the calculation of the liability for accrued compensated absences. In the past, the city had been including the future contribution to retirement in that balance, knowing we have to contribute a certain percentage of pay into the Elgers system. It's a weird governmental accounting thing that I could stand up here and talk about all night, but I'm sure you all have more important things to do. So just for the sake of this, I will say we talked to them about it. We've removed that percentage from the calculations, and we're going to make sure that doesn't get put in there going forward. And then with customer balances, it was a weird year with COVID and not being able to charge disconnects and all this kind of stuff. And so I think just as a result of that, we had a write-off process that was not done during the year, was not material, was not a big deal, but just as a reminder, we need to make sure we go through that process at year end and take care of those customer balances that need to be written off. The last couple slides here, these were more, as we talked about with John and Crystal, this is more just for them to keep in mind. We've got some fairly large accounting standards we'll be working with the city with to implement in the coming years. The lease standard is a big one. GASB 96, which is basically leasing for IT arrangements, is a big one. So we'll be working with the city to make sure we get those implemented and taken care of. They're also, even just today, the U.S. Treasury Department, that other changes bullet, the U.S. Treasury Department put out the final rule for the expenditure of ARPA money. I know we've been waiting on that for forever, and it literally just came out today. I didn't have time to read the whole 400-page thing before I got here. Would have loved to, but didn't have time. But there's just a lot of stuff that just continues to come out from the state, from the feds, and so just a reminder, hey, make sure we're paying attention to all that because it feels like the guidance continues to change. And then last but not least, before I take some questions if y'all have any, just a reminder, with this being our first year working with y'all, we do free quarterly continuing education for our governmental clients. We do a host of things, whether it's financial, non-financial, HR related, risk management related. And so as a client, it's open to anybody that would like to come. If any of y'all are interested in receiving the emails for when we do hold those classes, we've been doing them online for the last almost 2 years now. Get in touch with John or Crystal. They have my contact information. We'll get you added to the mailing list to make sure you're aware of that. And that's it. With that, I'm happy to take any questions, comments, anything else from y'all.
Questions?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you very much for a presentation.
Yeah.
So if a resident were to ask me, what is the financial situation of the city from the accountants who's done the auditor or the auditor who has done the review, how would you state it in layman's terms so I can talk about the city?
Yeah, I think, when you take kind of from a citywide perspective, looking at what the general fund has done over the last several years, where the water fund, one of the things that I didn't put in there, just because I feel like sometimes it can be a little bit hard to digest, but I've done snapshots of the statements of cash flows for the city's enterprise funds. So the general fund, we talked about fund balance. The enterprise funds have positive cash flows from operations. That's a good indicator for, are we setting rates appropriately? Are we collecting enough cash for what we're having to spend to provide the services? Overall, all of those things are very stable indicators of a prudently managed local government, I think is how I would put it. It's stable. We don't see wild fluctuations from year to year. I think, the covenants being met with, adequate reserves to make debt payments, all those things I think are evident of a stable financial situation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Not. All right. Thank you, Mr. Lyons.
Thank you all for having me.
We appreciate your coming and
Absolutely.
doing the audit and making the presentation. And it was not too painful.
All right. That's good to know.
Thank you. And next, the pay and classification presentation and discussion. Mr. Murr.
Evening, Mayor, evening, Council. Tonight, we are going to present the results of the pay and classification study. And joining us, we have, I think, Nancy Berkeley from Evergreen, who's going to lead off our discussion, followed by some talk on the back end among staff and council.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much. Again, I'm Nancy Berkeley with Evergreen Solutions, coming to you from Tallahassee, Florida. I'll give you a brief presentation of results. The agenda. Okay, so I'm going to talk about our study process, employee outreach. I'll explain that when I get to that slide. Current conditions of your pay system, the structure itself and where salaries are, a review of your compensation philosophy, discuss the results of the classification review, compensation review, our recommendation for a new revised pay plan, and a couple of implementation options and the associated cost estimates. So far in the study process, we conducted what we call employee outreach. That is when a few of our consultants visited there and discussed with the employees both what the study is about, their participation in the study process, and then conducted what we call focus group meetings and interview sessions. Focus groups with employees, interviews with senior leaders to gain some perspective, understanding of what they might like to see change with regard to compensation classification. We, again, looked at the current pay system, reviewed the city's current compensation philosophy. We conducted what we call external equity analysis by surveying the market to find out what their structures are, what their salary ranges are. So when we're doing the market analysis, we're comparing structure to structure. We made revisions to the pay plan to be competitive with the market. We individually slotted or assigned classifications to a pay grade, so we don't just move we move the structure, but then we also individually look at every single classification and take both the results of the external market conditions and internally as well of the hierarchy, and then make recommendations for any pay grade adjustments or assignments. We developed optional methods for implementing the new pay plan, and we have prepared and provided a draft report. Or we're still working on it, as this slide actually says. I think we've got a couple more chapters to provide in that. And then we are going to provide a final report following that review of the draft report and provide training to city HR in the same study methodology that we utilize so that you can maintain the system. If in the next year there's an indication that one particular classification is falling behind, if you will, from a market standpoint, you may collect some salary data. We're going to train in that regard and then perhaps look at even reslotting or reassigning a pay grade to that position. And then we will prepare and provide revised job descriptions. Feedback from what we called employee outreach, what I mentioned in that, and from employees when the consultants were there in the focus group meetings, was that employees enjoy serving the local community, and you do have a team-oriented atmosphere there at the city. There was a general concern that salaries have not kept up with the cost of housing and cost of living there and are not market competitive. Many employees believe there's no room or not enough room for advancement and would like better defined career paths or different perhaps levels of classifications, which we did look at during the study. And there was some concern that job descriptions do not entirely reflect the tasks or the functions that the employees are actually performing. I might mention that actually every one of these that we see here are fairly typical actually for us to hear when we conduct these studies. So again, there's some positives here. There's some that showing some concern certainly from an employee standpoint, particularly of course about salaries not being competitive. And again, that one I can pretty much state is in every single one of our studies that we do. So we did look at this, the type of pay plan that you have from a design standpoint. This is part of what we call that assessment of current conditions. We did understand and that you have what we call an open range plan with a minimum, midpoint, and maximum with 36 identified pay grades, and that the range spread from the minimum to the maximum were 52%. From a standpoint of a best practice, for these types of plans, anything from 50 to 70 is best practice. We see them generally around 50 to 65% generally. 65 even is getting up a little bit high. So you're right, that's right around a good place to be from a range spread standpoint, which would allow enough room for salary growth within that range. Okay. Okay, this one I'm going to ask you to just pretend you never saw for a minute, because apparently some gremlins got in our calculations here or this slide. That first, what this is supposed to be showing or should be showing is first quartile, second quartile, third quartile, and fourth is a distribution of employee salaries. Those numbers, for some unknown reason, again, I'm going to blame it on gremlins or something, are incorrect. So I'm going to send you a correct slide. I, again, apologize sincerely for that. They, just to say it, to state it, those are, should be 46.9, 25%, 14.9, and 13.2. So not as you see here on this slide. So again, my sincere apology for that. But as a point, however, midpoint is typically considered market, where employees would would expect to be receiving pay around that midpoint or market position. So they would expect to hopefully have their salaries progression in that, what I identified before, 52% range spread, at least from the minimum generally to that midpoint. So again, to state again what you don't see here, the salaries were more clustered, if you will, around the first and second quartile. That's not a surprise for us to see actually either. We see that with many of our clients, where unfortunately after the recession prior, salaries just sometimes weren't progressing at a rate in which we would probably typically, particularly at this time and everything that's happening in the labor market, expect to see them progress a little bit more. So I'll send you that updated one again, my sincere apology. Corrected one, I should say. The city's compensation philosophy, we understand that you would like to at least lead the market, perhaps have the, what I call, have the pay structure then kind of anchored at a slightly ahead of market position, that your pay practices are equitable and flexible. With an open range plan, you certainly can have flexible pay practices, meaning such things as hiring practices, for example. That the pay plan design, again, being you wanted to continue to maintain that administration of an open range plan, and that the method by which employees can receive pay increases can be across the board, can be linked to performance, and they can be longevity based. So a blend really of different methods of pay increases. We did look again at the classification structure. We asked employees to complete something we call a job assessment tool, which is effectively like them giving us a blank job description. So that common in employee outreach about some of the job descriptions, things don't appropriately or accurately describe the tasks that are being performed. This is a method by which we look at that and assess that. Again, we use the compensable factor scoring methodology in that second bullet to help us identify the proper pay grade plotting align, in addition to the market salary information that we obtain. So we did make some changes or recommendations to that classification system. From a compensation standpoint, we did conduct a salary survey, typical method in conducting these studies. So from the 25 peers, they're in bold. I'm not sure it's going to be able to, you can discern that as well looking at the screen. But for those peers, for the 59 what we call benchmark classifications that we surveyed, we had an average number of matches, meaning data points for each classification, an average number of 14.1. That's very good. But I will also indicate it's not like we got a match, the same number of matches for each classification, but we did have a very good response and collection of survey data. Okay. What we do is we take that data and we compare that to your current range structure. So we're comparing for each of those benchmark classifications where you were in the market and determine differentials. When we look at that in total across those benchmark classifications, when we average the results together for those data points, we find that at that average, or at an average market condition or competitive market position, translated meaning competitive, that your range at the minimum differential at the range minimum, you were 0.6, just slightly ahead of that. At the midpoint, 3.0% ahead, and then at the maximum 2% behind, if you will. So basically, your structure overall, all together, when comparing to the market average, was basically pretty much on point. When you look at a lead market position, which I know you're interested in, one of these two, 65th or 75th percentile, you were actually slightly behind at the minimum, 2.5%, at the midpoint, 4.0%, and at the maximum, 5.8%. And then at the 75th, again, you can see here at 7.9, lagging that percentile comparison. The 75th percentile is a significantly ahead of market position. Okay, that's definitely a leading market position. But again, sorry to go back to range midpoint 9.7 and range maximum 11.2%. So the new proposed pay plan is really, from a design standpoint, your pay plan. We just made an adjustment to bring it a little bit more to market at a position more competitive. So you still have the open range with minimum, midpoints, and maximums, 36 pay range, and range spreads of 52.2%. Didn't see a need to change that. But then what we did again was take this new pay plan with these ranges and individually review every single classification with regard to the market results and the internal equity results that we had, and plotted position accordingly. Okay. And so then after that, we said, okay, what are some possible or most appropriate implementation options that we think that the city would be looking to consider if to possibly make some adjustments to employee salaries. The first one here is what we call current range penetration. So we are calculating to find out, making calculations on employee salaries to find out where their salary lies in the current range. So wherever it falls, if it's at like 20%, then we want to place it at 20%. In this case, this example talks about 30% in the new range structure. So that new pay plan structure, whatever range it's supposed to be in from a classification standpoint that we've recommended, we take that salary and place it at that same percentage. So we're effectively, as a result of this, it's making, I'm going to call it market adjustments, because we're taking the same, place, so employee A and employee B, wherever they were in the current range, they're going to be in that same position, if you will, from a percentage standpoint in the new pay plan. And then the second one here is by the name here, current range penetration capped at midpoint. Again, uses the same methodology. We determine that percentage where the employee salary falls, and then we retain that same placement. However, we cap at the proposed midpoint. So if in that adjustment it would place it beyond that midpoint, we just cap the adjustment. We certainly don't reduce anybody's salaries or anything of that nature. And it certainly, this one doesn't suggest by any means that, employees whose salaries are already above those proposed midpoints shouldn't continue on to get, increases, of course, in the future. It just simply says that perhaps in a study, looking at it from a study, you might want to cap those adjustments for the purposes of the study. Okay? Any questions for me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am, this is Jerry Smith talking. On page 10 of your presentation, you said, I think the people in bold were matches, or not people, sorry, entities in bold are matches. Is that correct?
Yes.
So,
We obtained data from those, yes.
Okay, so my question is, you have Greenville as a match. So can you explain to me in what ways we are a match to Greenville, South Carolina, on this classification here?
So matches, so a peer listing of this nature is done by two things, whether it's proximity, and I'm doing general, okay? Whether it's general or similar in size, or by some identification was given to us as suggesting that for a particular area, we'd find some matches for that. So even in looking at the entire list here, and I apologize, I can't specifically say if that was the case specifically for Greenville, but if we find that in one particular area, and this is something we talked about with the department heads when we were there during that outreach, that an area might want a particular city or town, et cetera, to be a match because that's more similar to the work in which they do, we might have that for those classifications.
Nancy,
but it represents,
to clarify
I'd have
that,
to look at which peers data we got for that one too. Go ahead,
Nancy, to clarify that one for Councilmember Smith, Greenville, South Carolina was selected based on proximity.
Okay.
And the fact that they would be a community that we may recruit from, or they may recruit some of our staff.
Gotcha. I just was wondering why Greenville was and Asheville was not. So I guess if we're looking at pay, Asheville's just different.
Actually, I think what it shows is the bold is where they provided data. If it's not bolded, then the cities did not provide their data to us.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
We have Asheville, so yes, to go back, I'm sorry, to clarify, yes, on any of the, from a proximity standpoint, or the other that I described, again, and yes, Asheville is definitely bold. We did collect that data.
Okay.
That is the more typical, if you will, is proximity, even if, you aren't entirely losing, or attracting everybody from there, because that is still your general competitive market.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I have one other question.
As well, Asheville.
Sorry. One other question on page 12. What does internal and external equity mean?
Okay, so external is what the salary survey results are. Externally in the market, okay, when we go out to the market, what are they paying for the same work?
Okay, got it.
So those are the results that are on page 11.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, internal is when we assessed every classification. So let me go back from it too. So just to give you a little bit more on the classification, when we said we collected results for a subsection of all classifications. So we have market data for many classifications, but not all. So one might be like, well, how do you do it for the ones that you don't have it? Well, for internally, we come up with a scoring methodology, or we have a scoring methodology, I should say. We come up with a score then, a value, okay, for every single classification from an internal hierarchy standpoint. What are the jobs? What's the relative worth when we're looking at compensable factors for those jobs within the city? What does that look like? So then we marry up, if you will, that those values from internal equity, the view within the city of all classifications, if you will, with that external market data. That's how we develop our first initial look at slotting positions appropriately in that new pay plan.
Thank you.
Other questions?
All right, thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
So Mayor and Council, to continue on with some of the discussion that Nancy started us with, just a recap on some of the highlights and also the cost that's going to be associated with each of the options we're exploring. So first, before we get into cost, we have the participation. So generally speaking, we feel like the study was very successful. We got a 91.3% classification representation. So 91% of all the different job titles in the city responded to the job assessment tool, so the survey that was provided to all employees. And 88% of all employees in the city, including some part-time and reserve folks, completed their survey. So 255 JATs were complete out of a 289 total that we distributed. So Brian, next slide, please. And going into this pay and class study, we heard from council back in February of 2020, right before COVID started, that employee benefits were a big priority. So going into the budget cycle, we added a 7% cost of living adjustment, which you all increased at the budget workshop to 10%. So we implemented that with the annual budget on July 1st, 21, and that is what brought us in line with the average of the market minimum salaries, which Nancy previously discussed. In addition to some increases that, we're expecting a 3% increase to the scale, we've got options to lead our peer markets at either the 65th or the 75th percentile. And not to spend too much time on this, to rehash Nancy's points, the options that we're recommending that were provided by Evergreen are either the range penetration option, which would adjust all employees' salaries to the same position within a new grade if they move, or the capped at midpoint, which would do the same unless the employee is beyond the midpoint of their current grade, which they may still receive an increase if they move. But just remember that they're not going to be moved beyond 50% of the new grade. And keep in mind, everybody, staff, council alike, that we're not going to reduce anybody's salary as a result of the pay and class study. So next slide, please, Brian. This first slide has our average percentile option. So that is the average of our peer group under the range penetration option for table 1 and the 50% cap penetration option for table 2. So the bottom line cost for option 1 would be $613,855, factoring in FICA costs and retirement. Applying the same methodology for option number 2, the total cost would be $458,000 to the city. Next slide. So this next slide is the same for range penetration and cap penetration, except we're looking at the 65th percentile rather than the average percentile. So you can see here the costs are higher. For the range penetration option at the 65th percentile, the city can anticipate a $1.27 million recurring cost and just shy of $1 million for the 50% cap. Finally, the 75th percentile option, so the most aggressive lead the market option, would be the most costly. Range penetration would cost the city just at $2 million, so $2,064,768, and the 50% cap option would be $1.6 million. And then just to throw in some other factors for consideration. So we heard that council was interested in considering the Dogwood study as well. So we took some positions that currently exist in our pay scale and what they're recommended to move to at different grades depending on the percentile option we select. So this first option would be an environmental services worker. They're currently making a $30,299 salary at probation completion, so 6 months after we hire them, which if you apply the 30% methodology to their monthly pay, they can afford a $757 apartment or mortgage. And then just to hit on the Dogwood study at the top, the Dogwood study's findings were that for the area, you needed a $50,000 annual take-home pay, so salary, to afford a $1,255 two-bedroom apartment at fair market value. So next slide, please. So same information showing a basic firefighter. So currently we're bringing firefighters in the mid $30,000 range. After salary, after probation completion, excuse me, their salary is $38,670, and you can see how that would change with different grade recommendations from the study. And finally, we just have an example, same methodology with the police officer. Yes, ma'am.
This is single income.
Yes.
Thank you.
So this next part is your opportunity to discuss as a council and give us some guidance as staff on which options to pursue. You know, we've heard that, you know, we want options to phase in the implementation so we can bite off portions of the cost. So, you know, whether it be 1, 2, 3 months, 1, 2, 3 years, how do we want to phase that in? Which percentile option are we going to go with? Are we going to stick with the average of the peer market? Are we going to lead at the 65th or lead even further at the 75th? Are we going to choose a cap, or are we going to go with the range penetration option? And finally, if there's any discussion on revenue requirements, I'm happy to assist with that.
And so really at this point, first of all, great job, Adam, and the folks from Evergreen, so thank you very much. I think from this point, we're not going to ask you to make any permanent or definite decisions tonight. I think it's a good opportunity for questions and general discussion. We are having at your workshop meeting at the end of the month in January, we are having strictly the 2 hours will be devoted to financial review. And also we've been updating the financial model today. Brian has this week, and assuming he's with us in a couple of weeks due to some other responsibilities, we'll go through and show you a variety of options on what the 65th and 75th percentile. But I know it's important, council, as we've met with you, and I would encourage you, if you feel so moved, to talk about, you've been very supportive of staff as we've gone through this process. So if you want to make those comments now and ask questions as are, you know, and let us know how you feel about it. I'll give you that. Obviously, you have that opportunity now, but just not going to ask you to make a final decision because we do have some scenarios we want to show you as part of your financial workshop. But this is a good opportunity to ask questions or give us a little bit of direction or talk where you are. So.
Okay. Anyone want to start?
I will start. I have so many thoughts on this. Personally, I don't like the cap option. I don't think that's fair to the folks that are further along in their percentage. I would rather us move them up the way that they're intended to be moved up with the range penetration option. Also, I think looking at the housing study and the paid classes, I feel that we kind of have to do the 75th percentile. Even at that, our minimum paid employee is struggling if they're a single person to pay a rent that's affordable here. So I feel like if we want to be competitive and the pricing of housing and rent is only going up still, and they don't seem to see an end for it, we have no choice but to go for the 75th percentile. Otherwise, we're just going to be having the same conversation again in a year and a half. And I also personally would not want it to take 3 years for us to implement something like this, because that doesn't really solve the issue that we're trying to solve.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment?
I have a question. So in these various scenarios that you've given us with regard to total cost, whether it's midpoint or
Range penetration.
Range penetration. In looking at those numbers, are we taking our existing body of employees and saying, if this same group of people is still hired when we implement this, this is how much it's going to cost? Is that how we come up with those numbers?
Yes, exactly.
So my question is, obviously, we have a certain amount of attrition every year, maybe attrition is not the right term, but people leaving jobs. So if we had people going, man, I really want to stay with the city, and we had fewer people leaving the city than maybe would otherwise occur, it probably would cost a little more in all of these if that were to take place. Is that an assumption that could be made, or I don't know, I'm asking.
I would think, Brian, go ahead. I'll let you, you've looked at the numbers more than I have.
Yeah, Jerry, I think it's, if that slide that Nancy was referencing of the quartiles and where the folks are in them, most of our employees are in the first and second.
Right.
So you're right, if people were here longer, if we had people further in the pay scale, it would add more cost to implement.
Gotcha. But obviously, the goal is to keep them here.
Anything else?
I'll comment. I agree with going to the 75th percentile, and I would like to see it happen in a timely manner. I would prefer to see some sort of an increase soon. One, because I think that the job market is extremely competitive right now, and I think in order for us to be competitive with other, like, municipalities and other types of career fields, we need to be kind of at the higher end of things. And I think as a community as a whole, it will improve the community health in general. When you look at the big discussion about affordable housing and the discussion about, people complain that retirees move here, that's because they have the money and they can afford the homes. But if we are paying people a salary that they can live on, then they can live and work here. And hence, I think allows more locals to be able to afford to live here and continue the same. And so I think that there is a bit of urgency to make it happen sooner than later. That's how I feel. So.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I didn't comment on which one I preferred. It does appear from this that we're at least in for $500,000. Like if we're just going to come up to average, that was around 400,000 some. So at a minimum, we're in for that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I think my preference at this point is the 65% range penetration. And maybe when Brian gets real creative with his accounting and shows me how we would pay for the 75%, I might see it otherwise, but that's almost $1 million more. And it's a big bite to take. Not that I don't, think it's a good thing. I just think that's a very large, what I think is going to be a tax increase at one time. But I will reserve for Brian the Great to show us the accounting in a few weeks.
Maybe.
Debbie, do you have any comments?
I'm observing. I'm new counsel. I'm trying to soak all this in.
We value your opinion. We would like to hear your thoughts on things.
Yeah. I just think that we should move it based upon being able to meet the needs and accommodate all people to live here. Me being the experienced one.
My feelings, I would also go with the range rather than the cap, for the reasons mentioned. I guess I hate to make such extreme changes in the middle of a fiscal year. My feelings would be that we did it in 2 phases, going to the 65th percentile in the next fiscal year and the 75th in the year after that. Kind of ease it in, that people would know it's coming. But I think jumping into it too quickly would be more difficult. With revaluations coming in a couple years, I think it would be more responsible to put off that 75th until the following year. Any other comments? That enough input since it's all a little bit different?
No, I mean, I think the point of this is, as city council, you hear each other's perspective. You've heard the presentation now. We've shared some of these with you individually, so now you've heard it twice, and now you can digest it again, and then we can use our financial numbers at the end of the month to really help you fine-tune your ultimate decision. So I think it's a good process.
I think I would like to see, when we do looking at the financial numbers and how we're going to pay for it, an approach like the mayor just presented, but also something that was even more a little bit aggressive. I just want to see the numbers.
So we can give you, we can give you options right there live and in person. So
love it.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Thank you for all the work that went into this, from Evergreen and from staff. All right. Get back to where I was here. Public hearings. The first is a continuation of a public hearing rezoning at 0 South Allen Road. Okay, Mr. Morrow.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. As the mayor mentioned, this is a continuation from last month's meeting. This is an initial zoning from where a property was annexed. I'll get into that in just a second, but it is on South Allen Road. There we go. So the property in question is 17.13 acres. The subject property was annexed into the city of Hendersonville on September 2nd, 2021. General statutes provide that upon annexation, the county zoning will stay in place until the city zones the property, or 60 days from the effective date of the annexation, whichever is sooner. If the 60-day elapses without the city zoning the property, it becomes unzoned. So currently, this property is considered unzoned, but it was previously Henderson County Office Institutional. The city received a zoning application for this property from the property owners of the property. The request was to zone the property C3 highway business. However, city staff and the planning board recommended zoning the property commercial highway mixed use. I will go over those reasons later on in the presentation of why staff and planning board came to that conclusion. The city received a letter from an attorney representing the property owners yesterday. The letter was not to withdraw their C3 application, but rather to state that the property owners would be agreeable with this property being zoned commercial highway mixed use. Due to this letter coming in yesterday, the staff report and the presentation were already submitted for review prior to this new development in this rezoning. So due to this, some of the information in the presentation is no longer applicable, and that information I'll go through rather quickly. So as you'll see, the subject property highlighted in red, it's off South Allen Road. It does abut, has a large frontage on I-26. It is at the Upper Road Corridor area. It is in the general area of Blue Ridge Community College, and also some adult care facilities to the west. The existing conditions: there's nothing currently on the site. It is appeared to be used for agricultural purposes. There's no structures or anything of that nature on the site currently. The current zoning, as you'll see, the majority of this area is already, or is still under Henderson County zoning. The city of Hendersonville does have some zoning out in this corridor, but the majority is still Henderson County. However, I will point out that there were two recently approved planned residential developments that abut this property. The landings of Flat Rock and also Waterleaf at Flat Rock, which are the two PRDs shown. The mix of residential and commercial uses and the compatibility with this area was one of the main components in staff recommending commercial highway mixed use for this parcel. Future land use, as you'll see, the parcel itself is Regional Activity Center. You'll also see that the majority of this area is also Regional Activity Center. There is some business center mixed in and also some natural resource and agricultural, which runs with the floodplain. The property is designated as Regional Activity Center, as I mentioned on the future land use map. The goal of this designation is to meet the large-scale retail needs of Hendersonville residents while encouraging mixed-use, walkable design through redevelopment and infill projects. So the CHMU does provide the framework to allow the parcel to meet the large-scale retail needs of Hendersonville residents. It also allows multifamily by right, thus providing the opportunity to incorporate residential uses along with the commercial uses and achieving the vision of the Regional Activity Center. Additionally, the standards to encourage walkable design are integrated in CMU or CHMU through design standards. One of the design guidelines for the Regional Activity Center future land use designation is the mitigation of bulk of large buildings through facade detailing and window coverage. This strategic vision is directly addressed in CHMU through design standards requiring additional requirements for windows and building facade. So I will skip through this slide. It's not as pertinent as it was. So to give you some background on why staff chose CHMU opposed to the requested C3 zoning. So in 2010, Henderson County Board of Commissioners voted against the City of Hendersonville extending its extraterritorial jurisdiction, or ETJ, into the Upper Road Corridor. Although the extension of the ETJ was turned down, the city maintained a goal to manage growth pattern in this area due to anticipated development pressures and subsequent requests for sewer connections. On December 2nd, 2010, the City Council agreed by majority consensus to direct staff and the Planning Board to continue developing the Commercial Highway Mixed Use, or CHMU, zoning classification in compliance with Henderson County Land Development Plan, and to examine the utility extension agreement to make provisions for property owners requesting sewer service to meet the city's requirements for that area. March 3rd, 2011, city planning staff brought forward a proposal for the creation of the commercial highway mixed use. Planning Director Sue Anderson explained that the intent was to apply this zoning classification to properties in the Upward Road area that wish to annex into the city of Hendersonville in order to obtain sewer connections. She explained that the new zoning classification was closely modeled after highway mixed use, a zoning district which includes design standards for buildings and development sites. It was reported that the Planning Board voted unanimously to recommend City Council adopt this ordinance, enacting a new CHMU zoning district. So the map on the screen shows the Upward Road Planning District. This, like I mentioned, the area in gray shows what the proposed ETJ extension was to be. The dark gray parcels are parcels that are already in the city when the map was created, and the light gray just shows where the planning district is. So, like I mentioned, the City Council created this planning district in accordance with its sewer extension policy. Let's see. Yeah, so I think I've covered all that. We'll skip this. This is just a slide comparing the two districts. Planning Board took this application up at its November 8th meeting. Planning Board's motion is on the screen. The Planning Board recommended City Council deny the rezoning of the subject property from then Henderson County Office Institutional to see-through highway business, and further recommended that City Council adopt an ordinance amending the official zoning map, changing the designation to CHMU, Commercial Highway Mixed Use. The reasoning behind this was due to previous Planning Board and City Council decisions, CHMU and its comprehensive plan consistency for this area and designation, and just the compatibility with surrounding land uses. And I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
So, do we have to, the motions that are provided, do we still have to go ahead and deny C3 and approve CHMU, or can we go straight to CHMU?
So the application was never actually withdrawn, so it is still an active application.
So we have to still do the denial and then approval?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what we have here?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, this is continuation of a public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this standard rezoning? Is there anyone online who wishes to speak?
Madam Mayor, Lynn Williams has raised her hand.
Okay, Ms. Williams?
Good evening. Lynn Williams, Chadwick Avenue. With this particular property, I think the point that just showed on that slide from Tamara Peacock about the concern for the environment, I think that's a very important point when considering what you're going to do with this piece of property. Since you do have the land on both sides now going to be developed, I feel like that open space is really important for all of those people that are going to live there now. And I just wanted to point out that the map that they did just show, the Upward Road Planning District map, to me appears inaccurate because it doesn't show the outline of all the other houses that are just about to be built. It just kind of shows them both as blocks, and it doesn't show the site maps. And I think when you actually take into consideration what's going there, I just ask you to please consider how to conserve some of this space. The trees all in that area, you know, a lot of them are already going to be lost, and it's the last space that we really have in that section. And maybe somehow encourage the three properties to work together to preserve some of that and make it connectable. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Is there anyone else?
No, ma'am.
All right, then we can close that public hearing. Discussion or a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move City Council deny the rezoning of the subject property, PN 9588-22-1126, from Henderson County Office Institutional to C3 Highway Business for the following reasons. The rezoning is not compatible with the surrounding zoning that exists now and would better be suited with a different zoning classification. I further move City Council adopt an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the City of Hendersonville, changing the zoning designation of the subject property, PN 9588-22-1126, from Henderson County Office Institutional to CHMU, Commercial Highway Mixed Use, finding that the rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future land use map designation of Regional Activity Center, and that the rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. First, the zoning map amendment is consistent with the 2030 Comprehensive Plan, Chapter 8, Land Use and Development.
Jerry? I think that's where we want the new,
This sheet.
the new sheet. South Allen.
First, under South Allen. CHMU provides standards that assure future development will be compatible with recently approved residential developments. Second, CHMU created for properties within the Upper Planning District include these parcels. And third, CHMU encourages a more mixed-use development pattern.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Not, those in favor of the rezoning of South Allen Road say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it, and that motion passes for South Allen rezoning.
I would just like to say one
Yeah.
thing. The planning staff takes a lot of heat and not a lot of great comments, and the letter from the attorney that he sent to us was really thanking you and commending the city planning staff on the reports and how great you guys have been to work with, and I just want to thank you guys for all you do. I think you work tirelessly and not a lot of appreciation from some of the public, so I do appreciate you. Thank you.
You're lost in the
Madam Mayor.
desert.
May I please go to the bathroom for a moment?
Yes. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break here. I'll eat some popcorn.
That's what I was going to do.
Does anybody want some snacks?
The next item, again, is a public hearing for an annexation of Providence Walk.
Good evening, council members, Madam Mayor. It's good to see you all this evening. Most of y'all are familiar with this, the subject properties involved with this annexation. It is part of the Providence Walk project, which recently received zoning entitlements as part of the rezoning to the PRD that was approved, along with an associated site plan that was approved recently. This project also received preliminary plat approval from the planning board in December. According to the city's subdivision ordinance, a major subdivision requires that they connect to the city's water and sewer facilities. And in order to connect to those facilities, they are also required to petition for annexation. So the petition that's before you is for a contiguous annexation that consists of 4 parcels totaling 6.836 acres. The certificate of sufficiency for this annexation was approved at the December City Council meeting, which set the public hearing for this evening. The submittal from the applicant meets all the requirements of the general statute. And so with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, has this public hearing been advertised in accordance with general statutes?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding this annexation? Anyone in the audience wish to speak? Is there anyone seeking recognition online?
Madam Mayor, Lynn Williams has raised her hand.
Okay.
Hi, Lynn Williams, Chadwick Avenue. I just wanted to urge the council to please ensure the compliance with environmental review for threatened and endangered plants and species there before they do start building, to please ensure compliance, and also to double check the outputs of stormwater into the floodplains and make sure that that is going to be safe for everyone with the adjustment of the ponds that are there and everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Ken Fitch has raised his hand.
Okay.
Ken Fitch, you've been unmuted.
Ken Fitch, 1046 Patton Street. Today, for some of us, in our faith traditions, this is a sacred day of affirmation, revelation, and celebration. However, if this resolution for annexation, as represented by the deployment of its latest plan, is enacted, this would not be an act of celebration, but would constitute a breach of trust and respect that goes far deeper in its contradiction to any sense of uplifting community values, sadly questioning the true concern for health, safety, and welfare of all in the city that the resolution is intended to affirm. Now, ordinarily, a resolution for annexation would be a formulaic procedural action. However, there's a basic question here. What exactly is being annexed? There are 2 differing plans, one approved by City Council and one newly presented by the city planning staff as a fulfillment of the subdivision ordinance following compliance with DRC determination for lands determined appropriate for development. But this new plan would have a direct negative impact on the health, safety, and welfare of the city that you would be expressly called upon to consider an enactment of a resolution. You are being asked to approve a resolution, a legislative action that is in direct contradiction to the site plan and understandings embodied in the legislative action regarding this area that you took previously. Are you aware of this new plan? Have you seen it? Have you reviewed it? And why was there such a determined, intense effort to suppress public comment on this new plan? This new plan would impose construction of a connection in the right-of-way in the adjacent neighborhood that would pose direct threats to public health, safety, and welfare. And indeed, I understood that some had sent messages to that effect. And this is also in direct contradiction to the previous site plan approved by council that was expressly limited in its density and reflected understandings to avoid impacts to adjacent neighborhoods from further additions to the existing dangerous traffic situation on the North Main Street corridor. and it was a plan that preserved a natural forested area on the site. The new plan establishes a conceptual framework for more development within and adjacent to the site that would intensify the traffic and safety issues. Your legislative action was understood and designed and intended to address. And this new plan would decimate the forested area once intended for preservation. The cacophony of confusion escalates terribly. We have the explicit agreement between the developer and the adjacent neighborhood that the right-of-way would remain as it is and that there would be no connection to Strict Garden Lane. We have the City Council approved site plan with its understandings and limitations on density and no connectivity in the right-of-way. And then in blunt contrast, the planning staff conceptual plan for additional future development and constructed connectivity. As someone once commented, so who is running the show here? But not to be lost here. And central to your determination tonight is the public health, safety, and welfare issues that directly confront the lives of the adjacent community, with a structure that will block the natural stormwater flow that comes from the neighborhood. It also puts a construction that will have major safety issues as an elevated sidewalk, and it also has other connections with the people in the neighborhood that can certainly tell you about. In addition, the Duke power pole in direct proximity. In our recent civic determinations, we have expressed our concerns for affordable housing, workforce housing, sustainability, equity, and diversity. So why are we doing this to these people who work for the city, who deliver our mail and teach our children? Does our much vaunted vision statement of high quality of life truly extend to all people who live in the city? To paraphrase a great general, if you annex this, you own it, in all its ugliness, contradictions, and suspension of trust and understanding. Ultimately, the issue here is not at all a legislative decision or an administrative decision, but a moral decision that should undergird our notions of public health, safety, and welfare in all its dimensions for all people. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Mr. Fitch. Is anyone else seeking recognition?
No, ma'am.
Okay. We have received 4 digital comments on this public hearing. First of these, my name is Franco Carrasco. I reside at 229 Strict Garden Lane. I request delaying any annexation until there's a better understanding of the new plans and consideration of the health, safety, and welfare of Aquaha Village residents and the city. One of our primary concerns is health. Increasing the elevation to Strict Garden Lane will block the stormwater runoff. Currently, heavy rains do not pose an immediate threat as water is able to flow freely down the hill. If they build a connection, increasing the elevation will block the water from going downhill, causing erosion to the neighbor's property, the connection, and probably the power tower. Preventing the free flow of stormwater will also cause the accumulation of trash and debris, awful odors, and many health issues for neighbors in both communities. Who would be responsible for maintaining both sides of the connection, the sidewalk, and the connected area? Who would be accountable for cleaning up and damaging the neighbors' properties? How is Duke Power supposed to respond to emergencies about power lines if this structure is blocking their maintenance road? What will happen to the high voltage power tower behind our neighbors' homes in the long run? The new plans show a connection with the sidewalk and steep sides that can be dangerous to people, especially children. The sidewalk will attract and encourage individuals to walk through there. Who will be accountable for someone who may fall into the steep sides and get stuck against a fence? What if a child falls into the stagnant water and drowns? Who will be responsible for such a horrific scenario? Is it safe to walk under high-voltage power lines? If not, why is there a sidewalk proposed on the new site plan? The sidewalk compromises the safety of our neighborhood at night. We had 9 car break-ins at Aquaha Village. This was one of the reasons why a petition was signed by our neighbors and the developer to leave the area as it is. The City Council respected that petition. However, the new plans contradict and disregard the City Council's decision to leave right-of-way as it is. A close examination and analysis of the new site plans will reveal several health and safety concerns. However, leaving the right-of-way as approved by City Council previously will prevent most of these dangerous issues altogether. We are not trying to prevent the development from happening. We are trying to keep our neighborhood safe and respect all of our neighbors' property, privacy, and health at Aquaha Village. Would any of you sitting in this room not be upset knowing that your health, safety, and welfare are being ignored, disregarded, or taken for granted due to unethical and immoral decisions of ignoring what the City Council has approved in the past? Second one is from Johanna Bosch Diaz, 143 Strick Garden Lane. This is in regard to Providence Walk. I'm opposed to a connection of any kind to the adjacent development Providence Walk. I recall meeting with First Victory Incorporated in October of last year regarding their concerns and desires for the use of the right-of-way. Mr. Fowler shared his initial plans for the site, which did not include a connection, and told residents that he never wished to have a road connection but submitted new plans to comply with the ordinance. Neighbors at Aquaha Village submitted a petition at the November 4th City Council meeting to request that the right-of-way should remain as it is with no connection to Providence Walk. The City Council granted the request. However, it seems that Providence Walk site plans are significantly different from those submitted to City Council for its hearing. The plans show a right-of-way with an elevation equal to that of Strick Garden Lane along with a sidewalk. Needless to say, what we see in this plan contradicts City Council statements and understandings that nothing would be built in the right-of-way shown on site plans approved by City Council. I'm especially concerned about the sidewalk that will be adjacent to my property. I expressed this concern about the sidewalk at one of our meetings with the developer. This sidewalk will attract people both day and night. At night, it would be very dangerous. Would there be streetlights? If so, they would shine into my house and property, depriving my family and me of privacy and safety. I'm a teacher, and I know that young children are very active. Many children live in our neighborhood and play on sidewalks and ride bicycles. Children could easily fall into the steep areas on either side of the proposed connection. What if children fall into the steep area near my fence? We also do not want children going near the Duke Power Tower. Would anyone in this room allow your children to play near high-voltage power poles? The sidewalk will also be a potential gathering place for dangerous activity at night. Why were we not told about this change? Who will be responsible for safety here? We signed a petition to prevent such dangerous conditions. We're upset that our petition has been disrespected and the City Council's decision undermined, which is highly unethical and immoral. I heard comments and small talk about new plans for houses on the hill behind my house where the trees are now. We thought the trees would be saved. The promises made are not being kept. This third one is Simeon Espinoza, 115 Strick Garden Lane. This letter is concerning the Providence Walk project. I'm opposed to raising the right-of-way elevation to that of Strick Garden Lane. I live right next to the right-of-way. There are some safety concerns about the high-voltage power tower behind my house. What would happen if an excavator or backhoe accidentally hit it? This would be a dangerous and very scary situation. What are the rules or regulations about raising the elevation near power towers? Does Duke Power have to come out and raise the power tower to height due to the elevation of the right-of-way. In my opinion, the right-of-way for the Duke Power Tower should always be clear to maintain and fix any problems in a timely manner. Another critical issue is stormwater. Ocklawaha Village developers graded properties with that in mind. In other words, in the event of torrential rain, water runs directly into a ditch built in our backyards and flows down without flooding, clogging, or damaging neighbors' properties. If they build a connection to Strict Garden Lane, where will the water go? First Victory does not understand this stormwater situation. Raising the elevation of the right-of-way will interrupt stormwater runoff. The water will be blocked. This will be dangerous with pollution, standing water, and debris causing erosion on our properties. Stagnant water will cause foul odors, many public health and public safety issues for both house developments. Who would be responsible for damages, cleanup, and maintenance if such problems were to occur? This is not on Providence Walk property, and what will this do to the power tower situation? These were some of the many reasons we signed the petition with the developer for the right-of-way to remain as is. The developer agreed to it. The city council agreed to it. Why is it changed now? Why is there a constant push and pursuit to make a connection to Strict Garden Lane? Why are the developer and the city changing the plan after city council approved it? It looks like some people want to go ahead to build a road into our neighborhood that will put our families in danger. The city council approved a plan and we were happy. Why is there a new plan that puts our families and property in danger? Is the connection to Strict Garden Lane the first step to bringing additional problems to our neighborhood? Okay, that was the last of those comments. So I will now close the public hearing. Questions, discussion?
Madam Mayor, if I may, first I'm going to ask Community Development Director Lou Holloway to address the concerns about the change in the plan. But before Lou does, I'll just remind everybody this is an annexation hearing and not related to the project. However, point of privilege, I do want to take issue with some of the comments Mr. Fitch made. If he's insinuating that our staff is doing things unethically or illegally, I take offense to that. Our folks work very hard and work very long hours to answer questions from the public and from you, Mr. Finch. I don't think it's appropriate that you challenge our staff. They do a very good job and they work very hard, so I would request that you submit an apology to our staff at your earliest convenience. I don't think it's appropriate. They work very well with you and the rest of our citizens, and they do the best job that they can under difficult circumstances. So I felt like I needed to say that, and I'll ask Lou to please address the concern regarding the change in plan.
So I believe that the components of the concerns that have been raised were discussed during the conditional zoning district. So this was in relation to the differentiation between rezoning and the authority that the city council has to apply conditional conditions to a rezoning versus the requirements of the zoning of the subdivision ordinance and the administrative task associated with approving a subdivision plat. So the extensions of the roadway to the property boundary are a subdivision ordinance requirement. That is an administrative process. Staff don't have authority to vary from the subdivision ordinance. We can only require that a plat meet those requirements before it goes to planning board. So the subdivision ordinance requires that those roadways be connected to adjacent parcels and that those connections extend to the edge of the property line. There is no connection to Strict Garden Lane. The property line is the end of the roadway extension. The only way that that could be avoided by First Victory and the developer would be to request a variance from our Board of Adjustment. The Zoning Board of Adjustment. Staff have no authority to grant that variance, nor does the city council. That is held within the zoning board of adjustments authority. So there is a little bit of confusion between the zoning ordinance, the elements of the zoning ordinance, the requirements of the zoning ordinance, and the associated conditional zoning district plan that was approved. We did discuss these elements of that plan at the CZD hearing, and then following that activity, the planning board did review the preliminary plat for the subdivision, which met the standards of the subdivision ordinance and did show those roads extended to the property edge. So I do know there were a couple of other questions related to stormwater and impacts. A lot of those would be reviewed by staff and the DRC during final site plan approval, which we've not gotten into at this point with Providence Walk. Hopefully that answers some elements of that question.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
May I make a comment as well? This is City Attorney Angela Beaker. I just want to clarify that the purpose of this plat is not to establish any development plan. The only purpose for this plat is to show the legal boundary of the property being annexed. This is not a new development plan. It is purely so that we have a legal description that can be recorded to show the boundaries of the property being annexed. That's all this is.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, if someone would like to make a motion regarding this annexation.
Madam Mayor, I move the City Council adopt an ordinance of the City of Hendersonville to extend the corporate city limits of the city as a contiguous annexation to annex the property owned by Providence Walk LLC, identified as pins 9569-85-3434, 9569-85-1398, 9569-85-3178, and 9569-834918, finding that the standards established by the North Carolina General Statute 160A-31 have been satisfied and that the annexation is in the best interest of the city.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Not, those in favor of this annexation, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no.
No.
Okay. The ayes have it. The vote is 4-1, and the motion does pass.
Debbie,
I think it was,
oh,
no. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I couldn't.
it was 3-2.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We didn't hear you.
I didn't hear you. It still is the vote 3-2. The motion still did pass. Okay. So that property is annexed. Thank you. Next is a zoning text amendment, industrial conditional zoning district.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. This is a zoning text amendment. This is a city-initiated zoning text amendment. And a little bit of background on the project. It is related to the I-1 industrial and I-1 CZD industrial conditional zoning districts. This is a proposed text amendment to exempt certain industrial uses from triggering the CZD process when exceeding 50,000 square feet in floor area. And the driving reasons behind this proposed amendment are to allow the city to be more competitive for large-scale economic development projects, to better foster job creation, and to adapt to new trends in economic development. And I'm going to go through sort of the elements of the ordinance that are proposed to be changed and discuss a little bit about the reasoning. So there are a couple of places where we need to make some amendments to the current zoning ordinance. This is one in regards to the classifications of the uses, just noting that the 50,000 square foot gross floor area threshold, which would require CZD, is subject to any exemptions otherwise established in the ordinance. And then as you go to the Article 5, Section 5-12 for I-1,
highlights that some permitted uses in the district are exempt from the size limitations, and then goes on to differentiate how those two are addressed. So you have your permitted uses, which would still trigger the CZD at 50,000 square feet and above, and then a list of permitted uses which would not trigger that. Just another element added to the ordinance, noting that unless exempted above. So proposed uses, this is just an example list. We do have in the meeting packet the full list of uses that are proposed to be exempt from the 50,000 foot trigger. Textile mills, printing, publishing, apparel, or other textile products, furniture and fixtures. What you will find in that list, what we targeted in terms of the similarity between those uses are products that are beyond just regional or local application. And so products that are being produced on perhaps a nationwide or even worldwide scale, and therefore you are oftentimes competing with other locations, other states, to land those entities. The Jabil project and the work that we did associated with the Jabil project, the agreement with the county to, basically oversee the zoning and plan review for that, was a result of a quick timeline that didn't allow for the CZD process. So this is, comparable types of uses that we might be pursuing. Conversely, those uses that we did not exempt from the 50,000 foot trigger, obviously that would be a giant automobile paint and bodywork facility, but facilities that would be specific to local conditions. So they would not be uses that we'd necessarily be competing with South Carolina for, or anywhere else in the Southeast. Recycling center would be locating here because our community needed a recycling center. And so those uses would still trigger that CZD process. This is a map of existing I-1 within the city. I would note, the Upward Road corridor is certainly a part of this consideration, kind of, that works really, really well, doesn't it? Many of the properties in the Upward Road Planning District are currently zoned industrial within the county, with sewer extension requests and those sorts of things competing for projects in those locations, like the Jabil, which is a site in that general area, could be future I-1. But the map highlights existing I-1, highlighted in kind of that green-blue color on your screen. You can see those locations throughout the city. This is the future land use map, and you can see some of the future land use classifications associated with our existing I-1 zoning throughout the city. It's quite a few in terms of where we're headed with those locations. So in terms of comprehensive plan consistency, in reviewing the comp plan, there were some very specific action items within the comp plan that were applicable to this and which reflect the work that staff have done and the conversations that staff have had in regards to developing this proposed amendment. And that includes working with the partnership and other economic development organizations in packaging incentives and overcoming development obstacles for economic development projects. And another one working with the partnership to market Hendersonville as a business destination. Planning Board met November 16th and discussed this proposed text amendment. This is the legislative committee, I'm sorry. This is the text committee for the board. They did discuss a number of items, had a conversation about whether a higher square footage trigger would be a better option. Ended up not making a motion, only had the discussion. And then at the planning board voted 5-1 to approve the zoning text amendment, or recommend approval of the zoning text amendment to the city council. And that is my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Questions?
I have one. In determining the purpose someone is using property for, Lou, who makes, like, you know, you have that list of things that are allowed and not allowed?
Right.
Who makes the decision of, you are really doing this and not doing that? Like
a use interpretation?
Yeah, how does
so typically that's staff. If it's not particularly clear, the first person I'm going to call is Angie, and we're going to have a conversation about whether or not the use fits in a category or not. There are situations where you have a new use. Typically what will be required in those kinds of situations is zoning text amendment, for instance. This is completely unrelated to this evening's item, but I recently learned that aquamation is a new type of cremation.
Yes.
It is not in our zoning ordinance. I had a request to open an aquamation facility. I had nowhere to put it because it's not in our ordinance at all. And so we've been discussing with that applicant a zoning text amendment that would clarify and permit that type of use. So in situations where the use doesn't fit in a category, potentially you're talking about a zoning text amendment. Otherwise, it is typically a staff level review and assessment.
And a follow-up question would be, so let's say someone moved into I-1 and built something on the left, and then at some point sold their business, and they tried to do something on the right, the list that you had up.
Mm-hmm.
In that circumstance, how would we go about preventing that from happening? Like, what would be the, is there, how would you
So if
stop that?
you're in that case, like a facility that was constructed for one use.
Then they sold it to somebody else.
Right, sold it some, well, so it would have to go through the CZD process to get that use approved in that location. So it may be an existing facility, but it would trigger, if for instance, it was a use that was not on the list. So let's say it was a textile plant that was approved, was staff reviewed, buildings built, and then they go out of business, they sell their business, and the concrete plant decides they want to move in. That would have to go through the CZD process, and it would trigger the neighborhood compatibility and all of those elements.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. And we will open this public hearing. Madam Clerk, has this public hearing been advertised in accordance with general statutes?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So we will open the public hearing on the zoning text amendment, industrial conditional zoning district. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak?
Good evening, Brittany Brady with the Partnership for Economic Development. One point of clarification I want to make in regards to site selection. It's really site elimination. And so when we have sites or companies coming to us, one of the questions they ask is it zoned industrial? And so in working with your staff, that's something that we've come up with primarily in the Upward Road area, that if it's already zoned industrial in Henderson County, we're telling a client, yes, it is zoned industrial. What we don't want to have to do is go back to them and say, actually, to get wastewater, you're going to have to rezone. And so that's something to consider. In order to be competitive, as Lou stated, you really don't want to have to rezone. So just a point of clarification when you're looking at areas that are already in zoned industrial in the county and at your land comprehensive future plan industrial, that protects economic development. And I'm happy to answer any further questions in regards to our process.
Any questions, Ms. Brady? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else present who wishes to comment? Is there anyone online?
Madam Mayor, Lynn Williams has raised her hand.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Lynn Williams, Chadwick Avenue. I just wanted to urge the council to please closely review the changes to the exempt list, if you're going to go ahead and move forward with this. My specific concerns are around the paper and textile mills. In the past, my experience with some paper mills is that they smell really strong. Also, this type of stuff, there's on the list is concrete block making, not concrete plant, but concrete blocks. And so my concern is any use that would create any type of environmental pollution, be it air and particulate matter, noxious fumes, or in the water. And I just ask you to please consider reviewing this exempt list one more time through the lens of an environmental safety review and OSHA perspective, given that you're going to have more residents coming to the upward area as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Anyone else?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. There was one comment, and I have a feeling that this does not relate, even though it says it's for this particular amendment. The comment from Nancy Bodish, 1006 Park Place Trail, but her comment says the proposed number of units at the Greenville Highway in Chadwick are too many. So I believe she is commenting on a different issue, even though she did indicate that this was the one she wanted to comment on. Okay, so we will close this public hearing. Anyone have discussion or a motion?
I'll read it again. Madam Mayor, I move City Council approve an ordinance of the City of Hendersonville City Council to amend Article 4, Establishment of Districts, Section 4-5E2, Article 5, Zoning District Classification, Section 5-12, Section 5-12-1, Section 5-12-4 of the City of Hendersonville zoning ordinance to allow certain uses which exceed 50,000 square feet to proceed without requiring rezoning to I-1 CZD as presented, finding that the zoning text amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan, Chapter 8, Strategy LU-13.5, Action LU-13.5.3, and that the zoning text amendment is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. It encourages infill development and redevelopment in areas planned for high-intensity development. It fosters the city to better work with partners to attract businesses to planned business center locations, and it allows the city to better work with the Henderson County Partnership for Economic Development and other economic development organizations in overcoming development obstacles for economic development projects that meet the city's comprehensive plan goals.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Not those in favor of this zoning text amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Motion carries. That amendment has been approved. Thank you. Next, we have a conditional rezoning for Hendersonville Home 2.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. The city is in receipt of application for a conditional rezoning from Sanjay Patel of Sugarloaf Hospitality LLC. The applicant is requesting to rezone the subject property, PIN 9579567956, from PCD Planned Commercial Development to PCD CZD Planned Commercial Development Conditional Zoning District. The proposed development is a 4-story hotel and meeting room. A neighborhood compatibility meeting was held on November 21st. 2 members of the public attended in person and 2 via Zoom. This zoning district and final site plan for this property was previously approved by City Council as a special use permit in August 2018. The permit lapsed as construction did not begin within the given amount of time, and therefore the project must seek new approvals under the current zoning regulations, as this was previously a special use permit. The applicant is requesting that the permitted use of hotels and motels in PCD CZD be permitted. This is the vicinity map. You can see the subject property here is designated by the red star. You can also see its proximity to the I-26 and 64 interchange, and the other uses that are in the area. So you see that there's also Best Western, Ramada Inn, Hampton Inn, as well as a Day in the Country store and gift shop. The current zoning, as I mentioned, is PCD, so Planned Commercial Development. Parcels to the north, south, and west are zoned C3 Highway Business and contain commercial uses, as mentioned before in the vicinity map, with those other hotels and restaurants there. Parcels to the east are zoned R15 Medium Residential. And again, the proposed zoning is Planned Commercial Development, CZD, so Conditional Zoning District. So as you can see, grading has begun on the site. This is because the existing vegetation was approved to be removed without mitigation in 2018. The applicant began grading the site per the 2018 approval. When the applicant requested zoning permits is when he was notified that the special use permit had lapsed, and then work since on the site stopped. But the applicant will have to plan additional landscaping to bring the site into conformance with the current landscaping requirements of Section 15 of the zoning ordinance. Here's the preliminary site plan. As you can see, it's showing it's going to be a 4-story hotel and meeting room. Again, the zoning district and the final site plan was approved by City Council as a special use permit in August of 2018. Is proposed to contain 98 guest rooms. It's 16,500 square feet per floor, leaving a 66,000 square foot total building footprint. And then the meeting room is 860 square feet. Future land use map, the comprehensive plan designates the subject property and surrounding area as regional activity center, with other properties to the east classified as high-intensity neighborhood. The goals of this designation is to meet the large-scale retail needs of residents while encouraging mixed-use, walkable design through redevelopment and infill projects. Locations for regional activity centers are commercial areas surrounding US 64 and I-26 interchanges. As we've shown before, that they're quite close. This subject property is in close proximity to the I-26 interchange. And the secondary land uses include multifamily residential, offices, public and institutional uses. The comprehensive plan also designates this area as a priority infill area, which are areas that are considered high priority for the city to encourage infill development on remaining vacant lots and underutilized and underdeveloped properties. Again, the comprehensive plan designates this subject property as a regional activity center. The site is located in a priority infill area. It's close to the Interstate 26 interchange, and the proposed development will provide further accommodations for visitors to the city of Hendersonville. The lighting plan and the pedestrian connection is going to actually be addressed in more detail in upcoming slides. So I'm just going to kind of keep going. So the tree board is proposing to add a 25-foot buffer along the northern, eastern, and southern borders of the site in order to restore a water conveyance buffer leading to a blue line stream at the corner of the project site, to restore canopy tree loss, to reduce further erosion along the waterway, to restore wildlife habitat loss, and provide additional screening for adjacent residential sites across the waterway. And they also recommended if a reinforced soil slope is used as depicted on the site's landscape plan, the appropriate native plants, including native sedges, grasses, herbaceous and woody ground covers, and low shrubs be used on the slope, and that no turf grasses are to be used. So the next slide here depicts the landscape plan, and this will be able to kind of show you that the tree board is proposing to add that 25-foot type C buffer along the northern, eastern, and southern sides of the site. This hash line here actually indicates a 25-foot buffer. If the if they were to plant within that 25-foot buffer, it would impact the site here in the parking areas, and then in this area through the drive aisle. However, it would have the least impact on the site on this eastern border here. The second recommendation that the tree board mentioned was in regards to a soil slope, which is indicated kind of that, you can kind of see that little curved dark line through here. So just to give you an idea of where that's at. The blue line stream, which they indicated, actually exists kind of at the corner of the site. So this part that kind of juts out here, and you can more clearly see on this map over here. There's also a ravine, which the property line actually kind of ends at the, like kind of at the end of that ravine. So the slope is this subject property includes that slope there. So that is where, as I mentioned before, where if they were to plant in that, or the 25-foot buffer, or the type C 25-foot buffer here, that's also indicated kind of here as well. Planning board made the following recommendations at their December 13th meeting. Recommendation that the developer review the lighting ordinance and work with city staff to comply with the draft lighting ordinance. That there must be a walkway combining the day in the country store parking lot with this hotel's parking lot, and to provide elevations of the proposed hotel prior to city council. I will go that just to show that they did provide an updated lighting plan from Duke Energy. Staff has not reviewed this lighting plan, but if should this condition be made, then this will also be reviewed at final site plan. This is the pedestrian connection that was actually on the site plan. It was just kind of faint in this area, but after speaking with the developer, they are showing a pedestrian connection there. And they did provide elevations, so these are these elevations. And also, I will note that I meant to mention earlier that it was brought to our attention that the developer is requesting a change from the previous approval, from 2018's previous approval related to the height of the building, and the developer will speak to that in their presentation. So while we're looking at the elevations, I will mention that. But they'll cover that and answer questions regarding that in their presentation. So any questions for staff, I'll be happy to answer.
Any questions from Ms. Hunt?
I have a question. On the city-initiated, I guess, conditions, what is meant by the draft lighting ordinance? Are we talking about the, like, big, huge, big, gigantic draft ordinance that you currently...
So it's been hacked on by us quite a bit. But yes, there is a draft ordinance that's going to the planning board on Monday.
Okay, which we have not seen at all yet.
You have not, no. The one that you saw was the full MLO.
Right, that's the one.
This one is somewhat, I mean, it's been reduced in its scope somewhat. The lighting committee met on that on, what was it, Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday, to discuss and review, and then it'll go to planning board.
So the planning board supports, but the planning board has also not seen the new draft.
So they actually did see a draft at their December meeting, but they haven't seen, there were some recommendations for changes that were made by the lighting committee, which have not gone, which are related to the reintroduction of one of the standards for assessing whether or not a plan meets the ordinance. There's a prescriptive method and a performance method. The performance method had previously been removed, and at the recommendation of some of our lighting professionals on that committee, they're suggesting that we add that back in, and then a couple of other elements that are being proposed to be added in. I think with the planning board discussion, just to maybe add some color to that in regards to using the reference to the draft lighting ordinance in their motion, it was basically related to the dark sky compliance statement as a condition is, very difficult for staff to assess what it is we're supposed to do with that. Because, there's the standards associated with the dark sky initiative are the MLO.
Right.
So I think that's kind of where that conversation and discussion came from I'm looking at my staff to make sure I'm not going too far off the reservation here, but where the conversation, because there was a pretty robust conversation at planning board about how to, make that recommended condition. Some of the planning board members are concerned that not having the standard in place yet makes it difficult to apply it to projects.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered the question or not.
Well, I guess my concern is if it's a condition, but it's not actually a thing yet, we would be voting on a condition that wasn't actually a thing yet.
Yeah, my question would be, would it be the draft that they saw before the lighting committee's changes, or would it be the draft that they're seeing on Monday?
Right, that we haven't even voted on.
Right. I mean, I like the lighting ordinance.
It might be an
I want to make sure we're
question.
playing.
Which lighting ordinance?
So, obviously that's a condition that city council can, if they so choose, take out of the recommendations, or we can hear from the developer and then have further discussion. Maybe that's, as it relates to lighting, maybe ask the developer.
Did you see you read the entire MLO?
No, I didn't read the entire thing.
It's
robust.
Yes.
That's
So
very gentle word.
the developer may be able to shed light, no pun intended, on, on his lighting.
Okay.
Forward, so we just go forward. Hey, how you guys doing?
Good.
But yeah, I guess I just made a brief presentation. A lot of it might be repetitive from Alex's presentation.
And could you give your name and
Oh, I'm sorry.
for the clerk's record, please?
Yeah, this is Sanjay Patel. So one of the developers with Sugarloaf Hospitality. Just a little brief summary of the project. It's at 146 Sugarloaf Road in Hendersonville. It's sitting on 2.3 acres. It's an extended stay hotel with 98 rooms that all include small kitchenettes. We're gonna have an indoor pool and fitness center, an expanded lobby and outdoor gathering spaces, and just kind of uplifting that, just further uplifting that Sugarloaf Road corridor. And just to lastly mention, as Alex had said, that we had previously been approved through City Council. We were getting started last year, or I guess 2 years ago now, 2020. Financing fell through as COVID hit, so we had to stop the project, and hence our approval expired. Just a little bit of information about myself and our other partner, Amit Govinji, who couldn't be here tonight. We have, combined 30 years in hospitality experience. We're developers, but we also like to hold our projects. We like to be part of the community. We currently own the Hampton Inn that's across the street, and we've had it since 2013. And we've been part of the chamber ever since. Bruce Pope, who's our general manager at the hotel, is here with us. He's also going to be helping try to get our Home 2 project off the ground and get it running as well. And I guess the Dark Sky Initiative. So it was also kind of new to me when Alex had mentioned it to me back in November. You had sent me, I guess, the outline or the ordinance that they were thinking about.
Yeah, the draft.
The draft ordinance, which what I did was we had already engaged with Duke Energy prior to, just to have a draft for our site lighting around the area. So what I did is I asked them if they could revise that drawing and I forwarded the documents I received from Alex, and this is the drawing and some of the specs on the lighting, that they offered to us, that they've done, I guess, in other cities, under other townships that have dark sky. So kind of, I guess, that have been approved through those towns. As mentioned, the pedestrian crossing, what we're planning on doing is, in addition, is taking out a parking spot and designating a walkway, also designating a crosswalks from the hotel building that allow the pedestrians kind of to help guide the patrons to the walkway. And then lastly, the tree and planning board recommendations. We had already planned to design the reinforced soil slope with the native sedges or grasses. We weren't planning on using artificial turf. And what we can probably accommodate is that 25-foot buffer, 25-foot type C buffer along that far east side, which is circled for your review. So, yeah, that's it for our presentation.
Okay. Any questions?
Oh, one other request we would like to make is a 7.5 foot condition to extend our height from the 48 feet to 55.5 feet.
What is the extra height change for? Is this a plan sufficient? Yeah. Okay.
So the main part of the building is about 46 feet, but just the design of, there's a parapet that extends with just the logo and some design that extends a little bit past that.
Can we pull the elevation back up?
If you kind of see where it says home to, if you kind of look just to the right of it, that little tower.
So it's just that one portion?
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Patel? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Madam Clerk, has this public hearing been advertised in accordance with general statutes? Yeah.
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there anyone present who would like to speak regarding this rezoning? Anyone who would like to speak regarding this zoning? Is there anyone online?
Madam Mayor, Lynn Williams has raised her hand.
Okay, Ms. Williams?
Good evening, Lynn Williams, Chadwick Avenue. My understanding from a city employee was that the developer began working and clearing the land with expired permits. So my understanding is that is an illegal action, and I'm just wondering, where the accountability around this is. From my perspective, it seems a bit unacceptable to move ahead illegally like that. There was no tree survey that was able to be done by the tree board, and usually there's a required buffer near a blue line stream, and that was also ignored. And I feel like this sets a very dangerous precedence moving forward if you continue to approve projects that act illegally in the process to avoid the systems in place you have to protect the residents and to protect the environment. I'm just concerned that there's not enough enforcement and this action was irresponsible, and to please follow through with the request from the tree board for the 3-sided buffer that they're requesting. I just feel like there's too many rewards given to the developer here for their illegal actions, and I'm just so concerned that it's going to set a terrible precedence. And I just ask the city to please make sure this can never happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Is there anyone else?
Madam Mayor, Ken Fitch has raised his hand.
Mr. Fitch?
Ken Fitch, 1046 Patton Street. As a point of personal privilege, I'd like to speak briefly to the previous matter, if that's in order. Because I wish to apologize if my comments were received as a personal attack. The problem is systemic. The zoning ordinance and the subdivision ordinance present conflicting jurisdictions over what happens on a property. And I understand the staff is directed to following certain procedures and standards that they may not agree with. The larger problem is that situations occur with these incompatible ordinances to create harmful situations for residents. In the previous matter, there were promises made during the process that had not been kept as the plans have moved forward.
Okay,
And there
Mr. Fitch, I'm sorry, but we are on a different hearing right now. If you would like to submit those comments at a later time, we would be glad to hear it, but.
Okay, no, I want to make clear what that was about. All right, on this matter, clearly this area is an appropriate location for this new venture. Unfortunately, the site was clear-cut and graded before the application was submitted, but the packet does show a view of the vegetation, and one of the photos shows that some large trees were cut down. The applicant has apologized and stated that he would be willing to undertake some mitigation, and the tree board recommendation has provided some suggestion to explore such mitigation as they implement their site plan. And with a view towards addressing compatibility with the nearby residential areas. But it would, one could note that this improving the landscape buffer would provide a long-time asset for the environment of the hotel itself. And one does appreciate the developer's effort in this regard with his plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitch. Is anyone else seeking recognition?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and we had no digital comments submitted, so this public hearing is closed.
Madam Mayor, can we still ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Not of us, of them. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at what the developer presented, and I'm looking what I have written in front of me. And I think what you said was the 25-foot sea buffer on the east side only. Is that correct? Right. And this does not make that limitation, at least what's written in front of me.
You have the new one?
Yeah.
Sheets of paper.
Yeah.
So it is on here, okay. So my question to you is this, is if that was changed to a 20-foot wide buffer rather than a 25-foot wide buffer, would that be something that you could do all the way around? Because I know they mentioned a couple of places where it impeded on like a parking lot and things like that. If it were 20 feet rather than 25 feet, would that be something that would not impede on those areas?
I think if you look at the dotted line is where that 25-foot buffer is.
Yeah.
It's kind of going through the driveway where it kind of juts back in from the circle.
Yep.
And at the top, it kind of goes right through the parking spots. So it'd probably have to be very, I think that space would have to be greatly reduced from 25 feet. But if you did see our landscaping plan, we do have plans to have some type of landscaping added back in and some trees. But the area that we've circled is definitely an area that we can make those accommodations.
The other areas that you're talking about doing the landscaping, is there any way I could write that in here just so we know we all know what is going to happen?
I think it's on the...
So a 10-foot type
required.
is required.
Gotcha. So that's required automatically?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so you don't have to put that in here. That was my question.
Okay.
Will you stay up too? can we again just clarify the condition about the lighting? So you have in your presentation a dark sky initiative that was formulated by your consultation with Duke Power, is that right?
So, I guess if we go back to the beginning, before dark sky came about, we had just told Duke Energy that we need site lighting around our hotel.
Okay.
So they designed a plan for us, and then kind of fast forward to our November meeting, and I think one of the residents had mentioned something about dark sky. And then after that call, Alex kind of forwarded me the new ordinance that Hendersonville was thinking about incorporating. And so what I did is I took that attachment and sent it to my contact at Duke Energy and said, we'd like to comply with the new rules that Hendersonville is bringing out. If you can redo our lighting plan along with this new ordinance. And this is what they came back with.
So I guess, is there a way for us to reword this so that it says something about their
Maybe
actual
with
plan?
the developer's proposed dark sky initiative plan,
Yeah. I guess Angie would
For-
have to tell us whether that was.
but not specific to an ordinance that doesn't exist.
Right. I would much rather tie it to this plan that's in front of me.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
I think that's.
Yeah, then it wouldn't be a moving target.
Yeah, or he said, Lou just said it'd say as presented
The lighting plan as
Like I'm the only
presented.
one really reading this.
by the developer. honestly.
So. The dramatic effect is always great. So I want to mention, once again, even on the new one, it does not say it's limited to the east side.
I think that's
No,
something
it's-
we would have to change.
Right, that's what I point out, that's what I was asking him, is the new one does not limit that border to the east side only. Right, so I mean, I guess that was my question, is, when I was asking it was, you guys said I was reading the wrong one, but the new one doesn't limit it either. So I guess I'm trying to figure out what's happening here. So the one here is the type, is 25 foot all the way around. That's what is the wording on this, correct? Right, okay, not the wording that he's asked for. Okay.
I mean, it doesn't appear to be feasible with a.
No, I get it. No, my point is it's not written.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm just clarifying that
Yeah.
it's not feasible.
Well, you work your magic on the motion.
No, I've read some pretty long motions tonight. I'm gonna step
Maybe
back.
it's Debbie's turn. You haven't done any.
I don't think we should make her do this one. This one's a whole Frankenstein. I'll do it.
Gotta jump right in.
I'll do it. Hold on.
Okay, are you ready? Thank you. Or,
To pile on, you'll need to add the condition about the height
About the height.
on the list.
55.5.
55 and a half.
55 and a half. How would you suggest that I say that?
That the height limitation within the district be increased from 48 feet to 55 and a half.
Limitation be increased from 48 to 55 and a half. Okey dokey. Are we ready?
okay,
Okay.
thank you.
I'm going to take this off for this. Madam Mayor, I move the City Council approve the adoption of an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the City of Hendersonville, changing the zoning designation of the subject property, PIN 9579-56-7956, from PCD Planned Commercial Development Zoning to PCD CZD Planned Commercial Development Conditional Zoning District, based on the site plan submitted by the applicant and subject to the following permitted uses shall include hotels and motels. Conditions that shall be satisfied prior to site plan approval include provide a pedestrian walkway between the Day in the Country parking lot and the proposed hotel parking lot, provide elevations of the proposed hotel prior to City Council, provide a 25-foot wide Type C buffer as prescribed in Section 15-6, but without any fencing or walls on the entire east side. If a reinforced soil slope is used, to provide that appropriate native sedges, grasses, herbaceous and wood ground covers, and low shrubs be used on the slope. No turf grasses are to be used. the height limitation be increased from 48 feet to 55.5 feet, and that the lighting plan as presented by the developer be followed. Finding that the rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future land use map designation of regional activity center, and that the rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The site is in close proximity to a major interstate exit, existing commercial uses on Sugarloaf, including 3 other hotels currently operating in close proximity to the site.
Thank you. Does that clarify what we want covered? Thank you. Is there any discussion? If not, those in favor of this conditional rezoning say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it. The motion carries, and that rezoning has been approved. Right. Okay. Another rezoning.
One more.
A lot of words. Conditional rezoning, 137 and 139 East Central Street.
Just give me money.
All right. Good evening, once again. This project is one that will be familiar to a few of you. 137 and 139 East Central Street, conditional zoning district. The applicant is Mr. Pace. He's got great timing. He slid right in here right before. This is a 3-acre site. It's currently zoned C2 CZD. The proposed zoning is C2 CZD, and the applicant is requesting to add additional uses to the approved use list for the CZD. So this is an approved site plan. The location, when you approved it, the building was not there. Mr. Pace has since constructed the building, which is under the star there. This really doesn't work on the television.
He's trying. Under the star thing.
This is the site plan that was approved April 2nd, 2020, and there are no proposed changes to the site plan. This is exclusively a use-related change for the CZD. These are photos of the existing conditions, the building that Mr. Pace constructed on this site. Current and proposed zoning, not a whole lot to see there, other than the location and the zoning and surrounding zoning. You will notice that it's surrounded by R15. When this was originally rezoned to C2 CZD, it was from R15 to the CZD zoning. Future land use map shows this area is high-intensity neighborhood. It is immediately adjacent to the neighborhood activity center and kind of the intersection with Old Spartanburg and Spartanburg Highway. It is in relative close proximity to downtown and does have a high tension power line running through the front of the property. The existing uses under the current CZD are located there. There are a few that I would note, including light manufacturing and repair services miscellaneous. Some of the types of uses that were already permitted at the site that are reflective of the list that's been at or is being requested to be added. So the applicant initially requested specifically the automotive paint and body work. Automotive paint and body work is a special use within the C2 base district. So typically that would require a trip to the zoning board of adjustment. If property were zoned C2 and a project were to come in to do an automotive paint and body work, that would require board of adjustment approval. That is the only use in this list that is in the special use C2 district. Initially, the applicant's request included all of the C2 uses. Staff have been talking with internally, city attorney, city planning department, community development staff, following the discussion around the World of Clothing building, list of uses, and our approach to doing that. This is, although a longer list than just the automotive paint and bodywork, it does reflect a reduction of the C2. And basically, what staff did was to go through the C2 and look for uses that would sort of require modifications to the site anyhow, which would trigger the CZD process. So in further discussions with the city attorney, this list of uses would be permitted within the existing building. Changes to the site plan that were not, that exceeded the minor modification threshold would trigger the CZD process again, but changes including, a use change to any of these approved uses that did not trigger major modification would not trigger the CZD. And so Mr. Pace has had someone move out of this building and is looking at moving a new business in and needs to go through this process to get that change of use permit. There's no other changes to the building site, and staff are looking for ways to make that as efficient as possible for applicants who've received a site plan approval, thus the discussion and additional uses that are proposed here. So. The requested additional uses do align with Chapter 8 in the Comprehensive Plan, and it's the amendment to uses. It's compatible with the surrounding area and existing uses already established. And in particular, again, I would note that there's no proposed changes to the site plan. Planning Board recommended approval of an adoption, approving the adoption of an ordinance amending, stumbling a little bit here, of the official zoning map associated with this project. And I think that's it. I am available to answer questions, and I know Mr. Pace is also available to answer any questions that...
Anyone have questions? Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Pace, would you like to make any comments? If you would come forward.
Yep. As far as conditional zoning, I have a lot more conditions than the city writes on my properties, and this is more of a specific use, which could be a conditional, that it's only just for one prospective tenant. So that's it. I'm not inviting, saying, oh, I'm able to put a body shop here now, anybody that wants one, come over here. I don't want that. I'm just working for one person, and that's it. If they don't go in there, then it'll just continue the same uses that it's been approved for already. So, any questions?
Questions?
Okay, I've been either here or up at the City Hall 18 times in the last 4 years. I'll try not to come back and bother y'all anymore.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, has this public hearing been advertised in accordance with general statutes?
Yes, Mayor.
And we will open this public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding this rezoning? Is there anyone online?
No, ma'am.
Thank you, and we had no digital comments ahead of time, so we will close that public hearing. Okay. Comments, discussion, motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that the City Council adopts an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the City of Hendersonville, changing the zoning designation of the subject property PN 9578-249710 from C-2 CZD stationary business conditional zoning district zoning to C2ZD stationary business conditional zoning district based on the application submitted by the applicant. Finding that the rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan, future land use map, designation of the high density neighborhood and that the rezoning is reasonable in the public interest for the following reasons. The request includes no modification to the site plan, only additional proposed use for the existing building on site. The site will previously approve the both light manufacturing and repair service, proposed additional use in the target use of automotive paint and body to not present a greater potential impact to surrounding properties.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? If not, those in favor of this conditional rezoning say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, the motion passes, and that change has been made. Thank you. All right, on to new business. First, discussion, designation of a planner to represent residents' views in zoning, rezoning, and conditional zoning public hearings. Mr. Smith, this was your addition?
Yes. I do want to point out that I know that we've had a discussion tonight with Mr. Fitch, but I had put this on the agenda like December the 7th or something, so this had nothing to do with that discussion this evening. My concern is that in some of our more contentious conditional zoning presentations, it does appear to me that while we are doing our job, it looks from the outside at times like we are on the side of the developer. And I'm not saying that we're doing our job. And it seems to me that we need to find a better way to make it look like we are fairly presenting not only the developer's point of view, but also the point of view of those residents who are making comments at neighborhood compatibility and at the planning board. My suggestion was identifying a person in the development department to do that. There may be some legal limitations to doing that, but it does seem to me that it would help us make a more balanced appearance, at least from the standpoint of city government during these presentations. I don't know the best way to accomplish this, so I'm just bringing out the idea tonight. And I'm still, John and I have talked about it, still bantering around what is maybe a better way to do this, and I know that the planning department maybe has some ideas on this, but that's just a concern that I think we should find a way to address, and particularly the contentious ones where there's 100 people sitting out here, of how we present these projects to be voted on by the city council. So yeah, I don't have a specific way to do this yet, but I do think it's something I'm certainly going to think we should consider, and maybe if you guys have any ideas, I would be welcome to hearing whatever you might have to say or think about, or just something to think about.
Anyone want to comment?
So I will say the ESB is working on a sustainability plan currently, and one of the discussions that came up was, and I was going to bring this up at the retreat, but I'll just bring it up now, to plant the seed. But Matt was there, and we spoke a little bit about how if we were to have, like the town of Boone, for instance, has a position within their city staff that focus on environmental sustainability, that person, while they won't address all of the concerns that we hear from residents, a majority of them are environmentally based. They could be a part of the planning board's meetings that they have with stormwater, or not the planning department's meetings, with stormwater and other staff members, and go at it from the point of view of environmental sustainability. And so I think that would solve a little bit of what you're trying to get at. We haven't fully fleshed out that plan because the committee's only had one meeting, but they are working very hard. And so I'm hoping at our retreat I'll have a more concrete sort of idea of what the group's kind of coming up with for you guys.
Yes, a lot of things could fall under sustainability, and I agree with most of the comments in some form or fashion relate to that. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I don't see that we need a staff person to represent the residents. I have heard loud and clear from the residents. They seem to be very articulate in presenting their positions. I may not agree with them, but I don't think we need a staff person there telling us what the residents think. They are very capable of telling us themselves.
Oh, yeah, this is, I think my comment here is not that they can't present their own point of view. It's just, we make a slideshow about what the plan, what the developer wants, and do all this elaborate stuff, but we don't do anything like that for the residents who may have concerns. And so the appearance is that we are working for the developer. Whether that's true or not, that's my concern, is they didn't make all these slideshows and all this other stuff for the residents' concerns. So they are very capable of presenting their point of view. I understand that. But, you know, we just, it looks like we're making the presentation for the developer at times.
Well, we might look at how our presentations are done, because they should be neutral. They should just present what the ordinance requires and whether or not it meets those requirements.
I have practical and legal concerns about doing any of that. I'd be interested to see how many other municipalities are using taxpayer funds to advocate for private land use issues. I feel like there are numerous steps that residents have where they are able to voice their concerns. We have, I mean, and these are all regulated by city ordinances. If we have issues with the ordinances themselves, then I think we should take a look at the actual ordinances. But I disagree. I don't feel like it appears as that we're catering to developers. I think the developers go through a significant amount of steps as well in presenting their information. I would be interested to hear our staff attorney's legal opinion on doing anything like this. Those are my biggest concerns, and then also the practical matter of doing it.
I am interested in hearing what the ESB comes up with.
Yeah, I totally support. It's
going to be good.
Some environmental.
Get excited.
Advocacy.
Okay.
Okay, so then I'll ask a question. So if we had this ESB position and they were involved in the presentation and they came up and said, well, if you do this, you're going to cut down this many trees and that's not sustainable, you're okay with that? If the ESB position does that?
Well, I feel like if the agreement is for the staff to offer professional opinions on sustainability, economic development, I feel like those are all things that fall under our ordinances and comprehensive plans. To actually have someone to just be a voice for the residents, we are the voice for the residents. I mean, that's what we're elected to do, and I feel like the residents have the ability to express their concerns through public hearing, through all of the board meetings and comprehensive plan meetings and tree board meetings and neighborhood compatibility meetings and planning board meetings. And so I don't believe that we need to have a designated person to represent the residents. I think we are the designated people to represent the residents.
So then if we decide to make slideshows to put up during those presentations, you have no problem with that? Meaning we, the council members?
No.
I do think this would be a good opportunity, maybe not tonight, but in the future. Your city attorney may have some concerns about that. One thing that and Angie, you cut me off if I overspeak. A couple things I want to make sure I touch on. City council must base their decisions on, you know, what your ordinances say and the input your city ordinances are what you should really, and your comp plan, and those are the reason we did the consistency statements. And Lou and Angie can correct me or say this much better, but your decisions must be based on sound planning and sound documentation. including, as Councilmember Simpson discussed, this sustainability person, I would think that if they were advocating a position on sustainability, it would need to be incorporated into our comp plan, into our ordinances and those kind of things. And I think the idea is this person would bring those things before the city council, not necessarily at a rezoning hearing, but prior to that hearing that you could put it in your ordinance. One of the things that I think we're most concerned about is, and to your point, Councilman Smith, is if there's a challenge to a rezoning issue, and again, I'm wading into an area I don't need to, but it's going to be based on being arbitrary, and anything that a council member may generate that is given to a citizen may be used against the city. Angie, you help me, may be used against the city if someone challenges a hearing or challenges an approval made by a majority of this board. So I just would caution, I think your city attorney may have some caution about if city council members are making, I mean, you could do it as a private citizen, but if you're preparing slideshows for citizens to present and then it gets into a lawsuit, there may be some concern about being arbitrary. Angie, correct me or cut me off or whatever.
No, I think you said it just fine. I'd be concerned about setting up internal conflict between either staff people or between individual city council people or with staff. City council appearing to advocate for one group versus another group rather than focusing on the community as a whole. So I think you said it perfectly well.
Any further comments?
No.
Okay, thank you. Next, change in meeting schedule during municipal election years.
Okay, so this is mine as well. So I've emailed you guys what I proposed, and I'll read this here. The first one is, no City of Hendersonville meetings would occur on the municipal primary or municipal general election day. That's the first one. And once again, the purpose would be that we did not have any, neighborhood compatibility or anything that is our meeting occurring on the same day that we're having an election. The second one is if we have a primary or municipal general election on a Tuesday, well, it would always obviously be on a Tuesday, and there is a city council meeting on the following Thursday, which probably would always happen. I didn't do all the calendar calculations. That city council meeting be moved to the following week so that it's not 2 days directly after the primary or general election for that matter. And obviously this would only occur in odd number years. So even number years, this would not be a concern.
I don't think we should be changing our schedule to benefit people running for office. We occasionally change it for reasons, but just to make it easier for everyone running for office, I'm not in favor of changing it.
I had never considered that aspect of it. I had kind of been whatever about, I guess, the whole thing, but I think that actually kind of makes sense. I think I'm more concerned about like confusion. We have so many meetings already and so many things that get rescheduled, and then I would be more worried about just general confusion and disarray with the scheduling as well. I think that would be my biggest concern with changing.
I would say I do agree with not having any meetings on an election day to encourage people, like your one goal that day is to do whatever you do in regular life and go vote. You don't have to go worry about going to this neighborhood compatibility meeting or whatever else. And I would think that we could apply that to any election day, not just our election days, because
And that's more about the community, not the
Right.
actual candidate.
I would be totally fine with that. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So number one.
Yes.
I do want to point out with regard to confusion, all our meetings are put down for the whole year. So there would be no confusion because they'd get it in January what the meeting schedule would be. There would
Most
potentially be a problem if there's a
Don't look at
primary.
that.
What?
Most people don't look at it, so.
Okay.
Just. Okay. Any further discussion?
Okay, so we're in agreement with number one?
No, I thought this was just discussion. I didn't know we were going to take a vote tonight.
Oh, okay.
If you want to make a motion and,
I'll make a motion now. I don't need to talk about it again.
Okay.
So, Madam Mayor, I move that the city of Hendersonville not conduct city of Hendersonville meetings on municipal primary or municipal general election days.
is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion to not have municipal meetings on those 2 days, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Okay,
Thank you.
so that is guidance for staff.
Did you get to vote, Debbie?
Yeah.
She voted, yeah. Oh, okay. I can't hear you with that mask on. I'm sorry.
Quiet down.
It's hard.
Okay.
Who cares if we have a microphone? Yell anyways.
All right, next, approval of a resolution authorizing the use of the design, build, delivery method to construct the new Laura B. Corn Mini Golf. Mr. Carmen.
Mayor Vogt, members of City Council, Brian, I would ask, can you pull up the map first? I'm sorry. Just for a point of clarification, just want to be clear that the area that I'm talking about, this is Edwards Park at the corner of North Main and Locust Street. The area you can see here, you can see this is just a schematic drawing that you've seen before of a proposed putt-putt mini golf. But I want to show that we are looking at the area around the existing Girl Scout hut and on the, what we would call the north side of the property to the west at the bottom of the parking lot, and you see a corner of the VFW building that is owned by Henderson County, and we are protecting the area associated with the Boy Scout huts and the trees and everything in that area. So it does not include anything in that area. We may actually look at ways to enhance that area as part of an overall park design, but it does not impact the buildings as they exist today, and there is no plan to do that at this point. Thank you, Brian. So we'll move to the presentation. Also, be clear that as we move forward with this discussion, Ms. Williams brought up a point about historic preservation and also the state law, and I just want to clarify that that particular section of the state law relates to if we were using state or federal funding, we would have to do an environmental impact. We would have to look at a lot of things on that site, including not only historic preservation, but looking at archaeological potential issues or environmental. There would be a lot of extra additional work like we did at the police department. We went through that process, an environmental review process. We are not using federal or state dollars on this site, so it does not generate the need to do the extensive environmental review as we look at moving forward with the construction of the fire department. Hopefully that answers your question, Councilmember Smith. So the project description is to propose or construct a new fire station on the existing Fire Station 1 site in the Boyd Park area. We are looking to relocate the existing tennis courts to Patton Park, and we're going to relocate the Lauren Ecorn mini golf to Edwards Park is our proposal. Just give everybody a kind of foundation of what we're proposing to talk about tonight. How we got here, just point out that we've been discussing this since 2017. We had the initial station placement discussion beginning then. Our fire department did a GIS station location analysis in 2018, looking at cost call time and how long it took us to respond to various areas of the city. We had a facilities assessment in 2019. We looked at initial options, were presented in 2020. Councilmember Smith hosted a community capital projects meeting in February of 2020, received comments from the public at that time. Following that meeting, we took a hiatus of working on this project, basically from early 2020 into 2021, looking for alternative sites, including the VFW site and other locations in that area of the city. And the evaluations not only took into the size of the property we needed, but also the GIS station analysis. We were very conscious that we needed to look at our response zones and make sure we located a station, our stations at a location where we could respond to our citizens and the emergencies in a quick manner, in a manner that not only for medical, but also that we're protecting one of our prime visitor location, and that's Main Street. So we did take an extended period of time to evaluate alternative sites. Unfortunately, there were none that were identified that could meet the criteria under the station location analysis. And so we then the City Council made a decision in September of 2021 to move forward with the construction of the fire station, the new fire station on the existing site with Boyd Park. So project timeline, moving forward, we are proposing to move forward tonight with you approve the demolition of the Patton Park handball courts to begin immediately. We are moving forward with the final design development stage for Fire Station 1. So that is well underway for that design, and we continue to have regular meetings with our architect and our construction manager. We would propose, our plan is the mini golf and the tennis courts would continue to exist through Labor Day of this year. We are making a commitment to try to keep them open through the summer and through the Apple Festival, and we typically close the mini golf right after Labor Day anyway. And then we would start construction on the new Fire Station 1 in September of 2022. So again, we've made a conscious decision to wait until the end of the summer season to start that construction. Our goal is to have the new Laura Ecorn mini golf open by June of 2023. That's our goal, and that's the reason we're here tonight to talk about the design build process. And also, our goal is to have the tennis courts open by late 2022, and that is being facilitated by moving forward with the demolition of the Patton Park handball courts. So, talking tonight about the design build concept, there are several delivery methods that we may build city facilities. Design build is one of those. Construction manager at risk is another. Design bid build is a third. And those are primary the types of delivery methods that we use and are allowed by the North Carolina general statutes. The mini golf construction, as we have found talking to our construction manager as well as our architect, is a specialty. The average contractor does not build mini golfs. So we are, with that being, we are proposing to hire one contractor. There are folks that do this around the country to design and construct the new mini golf. We would hire this company, the city would, but then our construction manager would coordinate the construction activity of both sites. So that, in addition to the design build who would do the putt-putt, we'd also had to build a concession building and bathrooms, as well as other amenities in the park. So our construction manager would oversee that and ensure the coordination of the construction with the design build contractor. And Edifice and ADW would design and construct the remainder of Edwards Park. We feel like the beauty of this arrangement is we would get some savings associated with Edifice serving as our construction manager. They would be managing the construction of the fire station as well as Edwards Park, and we would be able to share construction management as well as possibly they will have to bid all
services associated with the construction, but we may see some savings there if similar or the same contractors get, for example, the same person doing earthwork on the fire station site would get the earthwork on the Edwards Park. If we're that lucky, then there could be some savings there because they could do the work simultaneously while they're there. So looking for some advantages there. We believe, with that being said, we have heard from the community and believe, and we would be requesting proposals from design-build contractors, and we believe that those design-build contractors and require them to build the facility and design it using these concepts, that the existing, that they use existing mini golf and regional elements, the elements that are at, as much as they can, incorporate the elements from the existing or like elements from the existing mini golf. They would use that. We also have Ms. Korn's notebook where she took pictures and has quotes, and we'd like to incorporate that into the design with the design-build contractor. We would seek community input as part of the design process. We would have at least one community meeting where we would seek input so that the designer could hear from the community about what is important about the putt-putt. And then finally, we want to make sure we capture Ms. Korn's belief that the mini golf is more about children, families, and the community than the game itself. So we want to take that to heart as we design and build the new facility. So the city staff and design build would schedule opportunities to gather community input. We talked about that. So your action tonight is to authorize staff by adopting a resolution as to utilize the design build delivery method for the construction of a new Laura E. Korn mini golf, and then direct staff to solicit proposals from mini golf design build contractors. I stand ready to answer any questions that you may have regarding this.
Any questions?
I don't have a question. I've already discussed this with Mr. Conant. In the resolution, Mr. Conant or John has in his presentation about using the existing, parts of the existing mini golf. And I just would like to add that wording to the resolution. So if you pull up the resolution, in the very first bullet point, or under the 1, 2, 3, third whereas, it says, the city wishes to construct an American with Disability Act ADA accessible 18-hole mini golf facility that will honor the legacy of Laura B. Korn. And then here, I would like to say, and include elements of the existing mini golf course along with elements that represent the natural and cultural features of Western North Carolina. That's the only wording I would like to add to that number 1. Otherwise, it's all good. It's in the presentation. I just would like to put that actually in the resolution.
Absolutely fine.
Any objections to that?
No.
Any further discussion? Or a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that the City Council adopt the resolution by the City of Hendersonville City Council to authorize the use of the design-build delivery method for the new Laura B. Korn mini golf pursuant to Statute 143-128.1A with the noted modification.
And do we need to add to solicit bids? Or
if you'll just direct us, that's understood. As long as you adopt the resolution, I will.
Okay. All right. Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it. Motion passes, and go out and see what we can do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is a discussion regarding pedestrian safety improvements at 6th Avenue and Oak Street.
Mayor, vote, members of City Council, Councilmember Smith asked that, or had received a concern from constituents regarding the intersection of Oak Street
and Highway 64, basically at the intersection of where the YMCA and the Wingate facility is. We have heard that concern before. We have done a study of that particular intersection back about 2018, just to make everybody aware that the main concern is that one portion of North Oak is offset from the other side of the intersection. So, and we did a study in 2018, looked at opportunities for pedestrian improvements as well as realigning so that there would be a T intersection there. We had a discussion with the YMCA at the time, and they were still going through some planning, and we did not move forward with that project. Fast forward to today, and there are several designs. Let me back up. There were several designs in those studies. Some were as simple as improving the pedestrian movement in the areas, putting a refuge in the middle of the road, as far as and also realigning the intersection or doing a roundabout. There were several options as part of that study. Fast forward today, in the last year, the state has done a study of many intersections in the city, particularly looking at locations where you may have vehicle-pedestrian conflict. They identified 5 or 6 areas in the city. They've completed the study of NCDOT. I believe it's included in your package. And one of those areas was Oak Street. Again, Oak Street intersection. It included, they looked at it more from a pedestrian perspective and how they could change the intersection as it relates to pedestrian movement. Again, putting a center refuge there, changing the crosswalks at that location. So I say all that to say there may be an opportunity, and Council Member Hensley and I have discussed it, if the City Council is interested in looking at possibly addressing this intersection in a variety of ways, either through just pedestrian movement or trying to realign if we could acquire the property from the YMCA. It's a big if because they are in a planning stage. But we could apply for money from the Metropolitan Planning Organization for intersection improvements. We do have this study that's been put forth by the state for pedestrian improvements. They did the study, but they clearly realized there's no money associated with the study. Mr. Detweiler has scheduled a meeting with DOT, I believe next week. I think Brent's listening next week to talk about this study and are there opportunities for DOT to get in the STIP program and other things to get them improved. So I wanted to address Councilmember Smith's concern, bring it before the council, and receive direction on is Oak Street important enough? It is important. Is it the number one priority to go and receive or attempt to get MPO money to make that change? And how far do you want us to go? And there's lots of opportunities. It would take design professionals and other folks. If you wanted to realign it, it may be a little easier and quicker if we were able to get the grant money to do the pedestrian improvements. But one of the things that you saw in our early proposal or our early study related to realignment, there may be the opportunity to signalize that intersection if you aligned it and made it a T intersection. But that would be a DOT discussion or decision. So I stand by to get direction, and anything, Mr. Smith or Councilmember Smith, you want to add to that?
No, that's awesome.
Would you like the question on the evening is, would you like us to reach out to the MPO to seek either formal planning money to do a formal design at that location where we could bring a couple proposals and put a dollar figure to the improvements, reach out to the YMCA again. Just so happens I have I want to call with some other folks at the Y next week about the strategic vision for the existing Hendersonville Y, so we can bring this up there and also look at planning that ultimately will go into further design, whether it be pedestrian improvements or realigning it to make it a T intersection.
I guess I just have one question. Maybe I've forgotten. Have we seen the list of problem intersections from DOT? You're saying whether this is our highest priority, not knowing what the other ones were.
That's a good point. I included it in your packet, but I would be glad to come back at your next meeting and make a presentation on those intersections, a formal presentation, so that you can see them all.
It is not on their top list, because I looked that up. That intersection is not on the DOT.
Yeah, they looked at, I'll be happy to bring that
Yeah,
report back to you.
If we could look at all of them and see if this is our top one, great, but I'd like to see, have some discussion about what the others are as well.
We'll be happy to bring that back at a future meeting.
Is that what the pictures are at the end of the?
I think so.
Red
Yes.
pages?
Yeah.
Ah, got it, okay.
Yeah, they looked at.
100% certain about that.
Yeah, got it.
I will say that intersection is a nightmare. As someone who drops their kid off at school and then tries to go to the Y to try to get across 64, it's terrifying. So, I mean, personally, I would love to see us align it and put a light there, because I think that's the only way to really make it as safe as it could possibly be for both cars and pedestrians.
And I think we've heard it from citizens in the area too, so. But there are a large, I think what we heard from the NCDOT, there are a number of intersections, locations in our community where there are potential areas of pedestrian vehicle conflict, and so when we make that presentation, you'll see some of their recommendations. Another being 7th Avenue and Martin Luther King is another classic crossing intersection conflict. So
I think Oak is bad luck or something, because we actually, I think, probably have more accidents at the 5th and Oak intersection than there are on the 64 and Oak intersection. The police or the fire department's always at my intersection. I really like the idea of, I mean, we've talked about that intersection like a lot, but I like the idea also of working out and reaching out to the Y, because the DOT doesn't have any money and isn't going to have any money for a long time. And so if there was a way that we could partner with the Y on developing a kind of a cohesive plan for that entire intersection, I think that is a good route to explore.
I have a question. In here, and these other intersections, this is, I guess, an aside, there is a plan, one of these is at the high school, but there is a plan for there to be construction this summer that deals with that intersection that relates to the vehicle traffic. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. It has nothing to do with pedestrian.
No, yeah. Well, and ironically, this was going on, and one side of DOT didn't know what was going on with the other side of DOT, but our city engineer made sure that he brought that up, that don't you realize that you're making improvements to that intersection? And so this report has now been shared with the local division, and hopefully they're going to incorporate some of those. So that did not, luckily, city staff was on the call and was able to put those connections.
All right.
You don't need us to do anything.
So
Okay.
you need a motion?
So what I heard is we were going to bring back, before you make a final decision, you want us to bring back and make a presentation on the formal.
Take a look at them and be sure that this is really the one we want to be pushing for.
Yes.
Okay. Next, request from Interfaith Assistance Ministries for additional utility bill assistance funding.
Received a call this week, before Christmas, from Elizabeth Moss at Interfaith Assistance Ministry, letting us know that there had a large number of individuals come and ask for assistance on utility bill assistance, and they are basically have blown through their budget for this year and are short on funds to provide assistance to residents. And they actually are in what she's termed as in the hole, $4,000 from what they normally budget, and they're having to take money from other pots of money for other types of assistance. And she wanted to make a request to the City Council. The City Council, under your special appropriation, allocated $8,000 for utility bill assistance to IAM. IAM had requested $20,000. We reduced it to $8,000. based on, and I think her request to the city council was, and then when I was talking to her, I was like, well, Elizabeth, how much do you need? Let me present that to city council. And so the fact that they're we didn't want to just give her the bare minimum, which was, and this, I'm going to get farther down the road here in a minute, but so we asked her to expand the appropriation to $18,000, so it'd be additional $10,000 from the original $8,000 that you gave her. So we're asking to increase the special appropriation to $10,000 more. That being said, then following that conversation, Councilmember Hensley and I had a conversation, and she reminded me that the Department of Social Services has funds for utility bill assistance. There's actually, and I had a conversation with Jerry McFall, the director, today, and our finance department had already registered and is aware of the program and has actually been trying to direct our customers to social services, but they have a pot of $132,000, which is state ARP funds. That is simply you apply for them and then at the DSS, and then the state would send us the money directly. So it's basically, and you just have to prove that you're delinquent or behind on your utility bill. So putting the two conversations together, I guess my request is, I do feel some obligation to help IEM because they originally we had original discussions when the ARP money came out that we would assist them with ARP money. And then the rules kept changing. We were going to give them a pot of money to help our customers who were in need of utility bill assistance, but then we actually had to slow that down. They were one of our early applications for ARP funds, and so we felt like we pulled back a little bit, and I think they extended themselves expecting to get that money, and they didn't get it. So that's about $4,000 over. But having the conversation with IEM at this point, we've asked them to stop doing or limiting their utility bill assistance and then directing as many people as possible over to the Department of Social Services. The Department of Social Services funds are capped at $600, so there's still a little bit of opportunity there for folks that may have bills larger than $600, but you have a request for $10,000. The immediate need is the $4,000 to make up the difference of being in the hole. Ms. Moss is on vacation, and we are going to sit down with her and Ms. McFall and our staff when she gets back to make sure it's clear. We have clear communication on, let's use the DSS, the $132,000 money first, that city funds are limited. We cannot continue to provide this funding, but you have the request before you and stand by to answer any questions or receive direction.
Discussion.
So I've confused you completely.
No, I'm just saying that, are you asking us to sit and wait or just go ahead and approve this?
I think I would ask, if the council's willing, I think I would ask that you would direct staff to sit down with IAM and the social services, but approve a special appropriation of up to total $18,000, and up to that point, and we would try to limit that well below that number, but that you would authorize us to try to at least help fill the gap, and then we would spend no more than $10,000. That's my suggestion.
Okay. I'm good with that.
And the goal is to allow people to utilize the grant funds.
Yes.
So that we are not using city funds.
Yes.
And also not allow people to get to $2,000 and $3,000 bills. Because to get to a $2,000 to $3,000 bill,
Takes a long time.
that takes maybe 4 or 5 years of usage, which is well before the pandemic started. So just making sure that we're communicating well with all the people.
Yes. That's my request.
All right. Any further discussion or a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that the City Council increase Interfaith Assistance Ministries 2021 to 2022 special appropriations funding from $8,000 to up to $18,000.
Yes.
And instruct the staff to work with IAM and DSS to coordinate efforts to use grant money associated with this as well.
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Is there any discussion? Not, those in favor of the motion regarding interfaith funding, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Motion passes. And you can talk to them some more. Next, contingent contract award of the French Broad River Intake and Pumping Station Project.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. This is Brent Detweiler, reporting remotely. Sorry I couldn't be there this evening, but saving the best for last. So this evening, we've, you're quite familiar with the French Broad River Intake Project. We consists of the raw water supply facilities, raw water intake, concrete structure on the French Broad River, along with raw water pumping station and emergency power. Formal bids were received on September 29th of 2021, but unfortunately we only received 2 bids, and as required by North Carolina general statute, the project was rebid, and again 2 bids were received on October 14th, 2021. The lowest responsible bidder, Crowder Construction Company, came in with a bid of $18,782,200. So we are asking for City Council to provide a tentative contract award, and you'll see the note on there that the final award is contingent upon the approval of the North Carolina DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, and the approval of additional funding requested by the LGC. Note that the State Water Infrastructure Authority has already approved the additional funding. They did that last month. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions? Okay. Discussion or a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move the City Council adopt the resolution by the City of Hendersonville City Council to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract for the construction of the French Broad River Intake and Pump Station as presented and recommended by staff.
Is there any discussion? Not in favor of the resolution for the intake and pump station, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Motion passes. A lot of money. Shoot. Okay, City Council comments. Anyone have anything they want to bring up? Not. City Manager report?
Just real briefly, talking about ARP, we had, as we heard tonight, the final rules out, but we are already
Finally.
we are planning, you'll be hearing about, we are planning input sessions for the public, one on February 1st, and then Ms. Justice and I will be meeting with various civic groups and other groups in the community, including Ola Carolina, nonprofit groups, Rotary Kiwanis, to receive their input about how they would suggest that the money be spent in line with your goals and objectives and the ARP goals. So just make you aware that you'll be getting information about that going forward. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. We do need a closed session tonight, if someone would like to make that motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that City Council enter into closed session pursuant to NCGS Statute 143-318.11A 1, 3, and 4 to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to the law of this state or of the United States or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the general statutes, to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and public body, which privilege is hereby acknowledged, and to discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area served by the public body, including agreement on a tentative list of economic development incentives that may be offered by the public body in negotiations.
Any discussion? Not. Those in favor of entering closed session say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it, and we are